My name is Janet Morrison, and I'm 47 years old. For 23 years, I was a high school math teacher. My twins, Kyle and Kira, never paid attention to what I did beyond mom teaches algebra to teenagers. Last month, they learned that sometimes the biggest lessons happen outside the classroom, and that underestimating your mother is always a miscalculation. I'd raised the twins mostly alone since they were 8. Their father, Direct, had decided that family life was stifling his potential and moved to California to find himself. He found a 25-year-old yoga instructor instead, but still managed to video call the kids twice a month and send the legally mandated child support when he remembered. For years, I stretched every dollar. Teacher salaries aren't generous, and raising 2 kids on one income meant creative budgeting. Thrift store clothes that I'd alter to look designer. Homemade birthday cakes instead of bakery ones. Staycations instead of Disney World. The twins never went without necessities, but luxuries were rare. Why can't we get the new PlayStation like everyone else? Kyle would complain. Because everyone else doesn't have a single mom teaching school, Kira would answer, rolling her eyes. Right, Mom. Teachers basically make minimum wage. I'd bite my tongue and agree. It was easier than explaining that teachers make more than minimum wage but less than a living wage, and that I'd rather save for their college than buy gaming systems. They grew up believing we were one step above poverty. It became part of their identity, the twins with the teacher mom who couldn't afford the good cleats or the spring break trips. They weren't cruel about it, just dismissive. Embarrassed sometimes. Mom's dedication to education is admirable, Kira once told her friends while I was driving them to a debate tournament. But financially? Thank God we're smart enough for scholarships. What they didn't know was that I'd been taking night classes for years, earning my administrative credentials, then my superintendent license. While they thought I was grading papers in my bedroom, I was completing dissertations and leadership certifications. 6 months ago, everything changed. Dr. Patricia Williams, our district superintendent, was retiring. The school board approached me quietly. Janet, you've transformed every school you've worked in, the board president said. Your test scores, your teacher retention rates, your student satisfaction numbers, they're unprecedented. We'd like you to apply. The other candidates have decades of administrative experience, I pointed out. And you have decades of classroom experience. You know what teachers actually need because you've been one. I applied. I interviewed. I got the job. Superintendent of the Riverside County School District. Salary, $400,000 plus benefits. The day I signed the contract, I sat in my car and cried. Not just because of the money, though financial security after years of stretching pennies felt surreal, but because I'd earned it. Every late night, every difficult parent, every troubled student I'd refused to give up on had led to this moment. I didn't tell the twins. They were seniors, absorbed in college applications in their own lives. I moved to the district office quietly, letting them believe I'd just changed schools. They never asked for details. Mom was still just a teacher in their minds. At least you have summers off, Kyle said when I mentioned working through June. Teacher perks, right? I started saving immediately. After taxes, benefits, and our regular expenses, I was banking almost $15,000 a month. College funds for both twins, fully funded in 6 months. A house fund because our rental was getting shabby. An emergency fund because I'd learned never to feel too secure. But I kept living exactly as we always had. Same 10-year-old Honda, same thrift store shopping trips, same homemade dinners. I wanted the twins to understand the value of money before they learned we had it. The revelation came on a Thursday evening. The twins were in the living room, supposedly doing homework. I was in the kitchen making dinner when I heard Kyle's phone ring. Hey Dad, he said, putting it on speaker so Kira could hear. They often did this. Direct preferred efficiency in his parenting. Kids, how's senior year treating you? But Kira said, just stressed about college. Which colleges are we looking at? Derek used we like he'd been part of the process. State schools mostly, Kyle said. Maybe Hudson University if the financial aid comes through. Hudson's a good school, Derek said. Expensive though, like $40,000 a year. Yeah, well, Kira's voice turned bitter. Mom's teacher salary isn't cutting it anymore. Not with inflation. We're looking at massive loans. My hand stilled on the knife I was using to chop vegetables. I've been thinking about that, Derek said. Maybe it's time I stepped up. Financially, I mean. Your mother's done her best. But teachers. He trailed off meaningfully. We know, Kyle said. She works hard, but it's basically a volunteer job that pays a tiny stipend. We're going to ask her to co-sign loans, Kara added. But honestly, Dad, we might need you to pay for college. Like actually pay. Not just promise to help and then flake. Hey now, Derek protested weakly. I've been consistent with support. You missed 4 months last year, Kyle said flatly. Mom covered it, but we saw the past due notices. We know she's drowning. Drowning. I looked around my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd balanced budgets down to the penny, where I'd taught them fractions using measuring cups, where I'd never once mentioned the 6-figure bonus I'd received for exceeding district improvement goals. Look, Derek said, I'm doing better now. The wellness center is taking off. I could probably manage $10,000 per kid for college. Per year? Kara asked hopefully. Total, Derek clarified. 20,000 split between you is significant. Dad, textbooks alone cost more than that, Kyle said. We're talking about $300,000 in student loans between us. Mom's teacher retirement won't even cover the interest. Maybe she should have thought about that before becoming a teacher, Derek said. I told her years ago to go into tech or business. But no, she had to follow her passion. I set down the knife completely, my hands shaking with anger. We're not blaming Mom, Kara said quickly. She's amazing, she can't help being poor. Can't help being poor. We've already started looking at loan options, Kyle continued. We'll need her to co-sign since we have no credit. It'll probably tank her credit score, but what choice do we have? Your mother's credit is probably already shot, Derek said knowingly. Single teacher income, she's probably maxed out on cards just keeping you fed. My credit score was 820. I'd never missed a payment in my life. We were thinking, Kara said carefully, maybe you could talk to her. About being realistic? She keeps saying she'll figure it out for college, but we know there's nothing to figure out. She needs to accept that we'll be in debt and just support us emotionally or whatever. I'll talk to her, Derek promised. Maybe this weekend. Help her see reason about your futures. They hung up after more promises from Derek about being there and making things right. I heard the twins go back to their homework, casually dissecting my financial life like it was a math problem with an obvious answer, Mom equals poor. I finished making dinner in silence, my mind spinning. 6 months of keeping my promotion quiet. 6 months of letting them believe we were still struggling. I thought I was teaching them values, but maybe I'd just taught them to be ashamed of me. Dinner's ready, I called out. They came to the table, still discussing loan applications. I served the pasta quietly, watching my children, my brilliant, ambitious children who thought their mother was a financial failure. Mom, Kara said between bites, we need to talk about college financing. Oh, I kept my voice neutral. We've been looking at loans, Kyle said. With our grades, we can get into good schools. But the costs. We'll need you to co-sign, Kara added. I know it's a lot to ask, but how much are we talking about? I asked. They exchanged glances. Probably about $150,000 each, Kyle said. Over 4 years. $300,000 total, I repeated. That's a lot of debt. We know, Kara said gently, like she was breaking bad news to me. But with your teacher's salary, there's no other option. We've accepted it. Have you? I set down my fork. Tell me, what do you think my teacher's salary is? I don't know, Kyle shrugged. Like $40,000? Maybe $45,000 with your experience, Kara added generously. I see. I stood up. Wait here. I went to my home office, what they still called Mom's grading cave, and pulled out a folder. 6 months of bank statements, the offer letter I'd never shown them, the district newsletter announcing my appointment that they'd never bothered to read. I returned to the dining room and placed the folder on the table. What's this? Kyle asked. Open it. Kara pulled out the first bank statement. Her eyes widened at the balance. $247,000. Mom, this has to be an error. Keep reading, I said. Kyle grabbed the offer letter. Superintendent of Schools, annual salary. This can't be right. $400,000. Kira's voice cracked. Mom, is this real? As of 6 months ago, yes. They stared at me, then at each other, then back at the papers. But you're a teacher, Kyle said weakly. I was a teacher. Now I run the entire district. 42 schools, 8,000 students, 600 teachers. I sat back down. But you're right. My little teacher salary probably isn't cutting it. Mom, Kira whispered. We told Dad that I was drowning, that I couldn't help being poor, that you needed him to pay because I'm financially useless. I kept my voice calm. Yes, I heard. Kyle's face was red. We didn't mean. You meant every word, I interrupted. And why wouldn't you? I've let you believe we were struggling. That was my choice. But hearing you dismiss my entire career, my education, my capabilities because you assumed teacher equals poor. That was enlightening. We're sorry, Kara said, tears forming. We just assumed. You assumed that because I chose to teach, I chose poverty. That passion and financial success can't coexist. That your mother, who raised you alone, kept you fed and clothed and loved, must be drowning because she's just a teacher. How long have you been saving? Kyle asked quietly. 6 months. Your college funds are fully funded. Both of you. Any school you can get into, I can afford. But you didn't tell us, Kira accused. You let us worry. Did you worry? I asked. Or did you just pity me? There's a difference. Silence stretched between us. For 18 years, I continued, I've shown you that teachers matter. That education changes lives. That service to others is noble. But the moment you thought I couldn't pay for your college, all of that disappeared. I became poor mom with her little teacher's salary. That's not fair, Kyle protested. We respect what you do. Do you? Then why was your first instinct to call your father and plan around me instead of talking to me? Neither answered. I have a PhD in education leadership, I said. I've published papers on systemic reform. I've transformed failing schools into success stories. But you never asked about any of that. You saw teacher and stopped looking. We're sorry, Kira said again, meaning it this time. Everyone says teachers don't make money. Most don't, I agreed. But I didn't stay in a classroom. I kept learning, growing, advancing. Just like I've always told you to do, but you were too busy feeling sorry for me to notice. I pulled out 2 more pieces of paper. These are your college accounts. $200,000 each. Enough for any school, plus graduate school if you choose. No loans needed. They stared at the numbers in shock. Mom, Kyle's voice broke. We don't deserve this. Not after. You're my children. Of course you deserve it. I softened my tone. But I hope you've learned something tonight. Never underestimate teachers, Kira offered weakly. Never underestimate anyone, I corrected. The janitor at your school might own rental properties. The bus driver might be a day trader. The cafeteria worker might have a master's degree. You assumed my worth based on my job title, not my capabilities. What about Dad? Kyle asked. He thinks. Your father can think whatever he wants. He chose to leave and contribute the bare minimum. I chose to stay and build something. The results speak for themselves. We finished dinner in contemplative silence. Later, I heard them on the phone with Derek, explaining the situation. His disbelief was audible even from my room. That's impossible, he kept saying. Janet's a teacher. Teachers don't make that kind of money. Mom's not just a teacher anymore, Dad, Kira said firmly. She's the superintendent. She runs everything. But she never said anything when I offered $20,000. Because she didn't need your money, Kyle said. She never did. She was testing us, and we failed. The next few weeks were awkward. The twins tiptoed around me, suddenly interested in my work, my responsibilities, my achievements. They read every article about my appointment, watched school board meetings online, asked questions about educational policy. Is it too late? Kara asked one evening. To actually know you. It's never too late, I assured her. But know me as I am, not as you assumed I was. They both chose Hudson University in the end, not for the prestige, but for the education program. They wanted to understand what I'd built my life on. Kyle switched his major from business to educational technology. Kira chose educational psychology. We want to understand, Kyle explained, how you saw so much in a career everyone else dismisses. Because I didn't just teach subjects, I said. I taught students, and every student was succeeded because of something I did. That was worth more than any salary. But the salary doesn't hurt, Kira added with a small smile. No, I laughed. It certainly doesn't. At graduation, they both thanked me in their speeches, not for paying for college, but for showing them that success isn't measured in dollars alone. That respect isn't earned by titles but by impact. That their mother, who they'd pitied for her little teacher salary, had quietly become one of the most powerful educators in the state. Derek attended the ceremony, still stunned by the transformation in his children's perspective. And mine. You could have told me, he said afterward. About the promotion. I would have. What? Respected me more? Contributed more? Been a better father? I shook my head. Respect shouldn't be conditional on income, Derek. That's the lesson here. He left quickly after that, probably to tell his yoga instructor wife about his superintendent ex-wife. I didn't care. I have my children, my educated, humbled, aware children, and a career that mattered. The twins are in their second year at Hudson now. They call regularly, not for money, but for advice. They volunteer at local schools, tutor struggling students, understand finally that education is both a passion and a profession. Last week, Kira sent me a photo from her educational policy class. On the board, her professor had written, Case Study, Superintendent Janet Morrison's Riverside Reform Model. They're studying you, Mom, her text read. My professor says you're revolutionizing district management. My classmates don't believe you're my mom. Tell them I'm just a teacher, I replied, one who never stopped learning. She sent back a heart emoji and one more message. Teacher salary or not, you're the richest person I know. Finally, they understood. Success isn't about the size of your paycheck, though mine is quite comfortable now. It's about the size of your impact, and teachers, we impact the future, one student at a time. Even when those students are our own children, learning the hardest lesson of all, never underestimate someone who dedicates their life to others. We might just surprise you, especially when college tuition bills come due.
The cold metal of the key bit into my palm, a tiny, satisfying ache. 6 years. 6 years of this exact moment playing out in my head, a silent movie on repeat. Now the screen was real, the chipped paint on the porch railing, the overgrown rose bushes my mother used to tend, the slightly crooked mailbox with the faded numbers, my numbers, or they used to be. Before I continue, comment your country or city. I love seeing where my stories land. I stood there, a stranger on my own sidewalk, staring at the house where I'd spent the first 19 years of my life, the house that had been ripped out from under me like a cheap tablecloth. The memory hit me, sharp and sudden, like a splash of cold water. It was late, past midnight, and I was hunched in the cramped, mildew-scented shower stall of my freshman dorm. The water pressure was a joke, a pathetic dribble compared to the powerful spray of the shower back home. The word tasted like ash. My phone, propped precariously on a plastic caddy outside the curtain, buzzed. It was Mom. Vivienne. Her voice was a thin whisper, barely audible over the pathetic showerhead. Are you there? Yeah, Mom. What's up? Everything okay? I pulled the curtain back just enough to see her face on the screen, illuminated by the dim dorm light. Her eyes were red, her usually neat hair disheveled. She looked small, shrunken. Your father, he rented out your room. The words tumbled out, rushed and breathless, as if she was afraid someone would hear. He gutted it, put up a wall. It's a separate entrance now for a tenant. My stomach dropped. Not just a tenant, but a separate entrance. Like my room had been surgically removed from the house, from me, like I was a tumor. What are you talking about? My voice was tight, thin. My room. Why? Where would I sleep when I come home for breaks? A long, agonizing silence stretched between us. I could hear her ragged breathing, then a deeper voice booming from somewhere off screen. My father, Marcus. Even through the phone, his voice was a physical presence, a cold front moving in. Because she's never coming back, he'd roared, his words echoing in the tiny dorm bathroom. She made her choice. Useless art degree. She wants to be an artist. She can paint on the streets. This isn't a charity. This is a home for people who contribute. That was Marcus. Always. Contribution. His favorite word. My entire life had been a series of contributions I failed to make, at least in his eyes. Flashback 1. I was 12, proudly showing him a watercolor painting of our dog, Buster. He'd barely glanced at it. That's nice, Vivienne, but what's the use? Can you eat it? Can it pay the bills? He tossed it onto a pile of newspapers, where it was later accidentally thrown out with the recycling. I'd found it, crumpled and stained in the bin. Flashback 2. High school, junior year. I'd gotten a scholarship offer for a summer art program at a prestigious college. I was ecstatic. He'd scoffed. A scholarship for art, hey? That's not a scholarship, Vivian. That's a handout for a hobby. Focus on something real, business, law. Something that makes money. He'd made me turn it down, insisting I get a summer job at his friend's accounting firm. I spent the summer filing invoices, my fingers itching for a paintbrush. Flashback 3. My college acceptance letters. I got into a few good art schools, but also a state university with a strong business program. He'd underlined the business program with a red pen. This is your path, Vivian. Practical. Sensible. When I chose the art program, even with partial scholarships, he'd just shaken his head, a look of profound disappointment etched onto his face. You'll regret this. You'll be broke. You'll be back here, begging. He'd been wrong about the begging anyway. 6 years later, I was Vivian Burton, 25 years old, and my useless art degree had built me an empire. Okay, maybe not an empire, but a damn good one-woman show. My online brand, Vivian Designs, specializing in custom digital illustrations and branding for small businesses, was booming. I had a team of freelancers working under me, a waiting list of clients, and a bank account that made Marcus's sensible investments look like pocket change. Last week I'd wired $620,000. Every penny earned, every late night, every client negotiation, every pixel placed. It felt like a physical weight, a solid, undeniable proof that I was more than just the girl whose room got sold. I was the woman who bought it back. The sun glinted off the brass numbers on the mailbox. 14 Tito, my address. My fingers tightened around the key. It wasn't just a house key. It was a weapon. It was a declaration. It was the answer to every dismissive glance, every cutting remark, every time he told me I was nothing. I took a deep breath, the scent of blooming jasmine from the neighbor's yard filling my lungs. It was time. My knuckles connected with the solid oak door, a sound that reverberated through the quiet afternoon. It wasn't a tentative tap, but a firm, deliberate knock, announcing my presence. The key in my hand felt heavier now, a tangible weight of all the years of simmering resentment and quiet determination. A moment passed, then another. I heard footsteps inside, heavy and familiar. The deadbolt clicked, then the doorknob turned. The door swung inward, revealing Marcus. He was late 50s now, his hair thinner, more gray, but the same hard lines around his mouth, the same dismissive glint in his eyes. He stood there, framed by the doorway, wearing a faded polo shirt and cargo shorts, looking exactly as he always had, like the undisputed king of his castle. His eyes, initially narrowed in annoyance at the unexpected caller, widened slightly when they landed on me. Recognition dawned, slow and painful like a bruise blooming. His jaw went slack. Vivian? The word was a strangled whisper laced with disbelief, as if he'd seen a ghost. Behind him I caught a glimpse of Avery, my mother, mid-50s, her shoulders hunched, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her eyes, wide and fearful, locked onto mine. She didn't speak, didn't move, just trembled slightly, a deer caught in headlights. The sight of her, so small and fragile, ignited a fresh spark of resolve within me. This wasn't just for me, it was for her too. I met Marcus's stunned gaze, my expression carefully neutral. No triumph, no anger, just a quiet, unshakable certainty. "Hello, Dad," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Mom." He blinked, still processing. "What are you doing here?" I thought you were in New York." "I was," I replied, taking a small step forward, forcing him to instinctively step back. "But I needed to come back for this." I held up the key, letting it dangle between my fingers. Then I held up a crisp, official-looking document, folded neatly. The deed. "I own this house now." The color drained from his face, leaving it a sickly gray. Avery gasped, a tiny, almost inaudible sound, her hand flying to her mouth. The moment stretched, thick with unspoken accusations and dawning realization. It had been a long time coming. The plan had started months ago. Not long after I hit my first major financial milestone, the idea had solidified. I'd been talking to Milo, my talent agent, and, well, more than that these days. He's early 30s, grounded, always knows how to cut through my emotional noise. We were grabbing coffee in my Brooklyn studio, brainstorming new client pitches. "You know," I'd said, stirring my latte, "I keep thinking about that house, my old house, the one my dad sold my room out of." Milo had just nodded, used to my occasional tangents about my family trauma. "Yeah? Still stings, huh?" "It's not just stinging," I'd admitted. "It's the loose end, a symbol. I want to buy it back." He'd raised an eyebrow. "Seriously? That's a huge emotional investment, Viv, and a financial one." "I'm serious," I'd insisted. "It's not about living there. It's about reclaiming something, taking back what he took from me." Milo, ever the pragmatist, had helped me put together a strategy. We'd started by setting up an alert system for the property address. I knew Marcus was always dabbling in shady investments, always overextending himself. It was only a matter of time before something cracked. I'd spent hours late into the night stalking local real estate listings, poring over public records. It was tedious, obsessive work, but I was driven. Then, about 2 months ago, the alert had finally pinged. A notice of default. Marcus had missed multiple mortgage payments. The bank was moving to foreclose. It was a distressed sale, a quick turnaround. Milo had put me in touch with a discreet real estate lawyer, and we'd moved fast, under the radar. Marcus had no idea. He probably thought he had months, maybe even a year, before the bank fully seized it. He hadn't bothered to check the public auction listings. He was too busy being Marcus. We closed on the house just last week, the same week I'd wired the $620,000. It had been a whirlwind of paperwork and wire transfers, all handled remotely, all designed to ensure Marcus wouldn't catch wind of it until it was too late. Now, standing on the threshold of my old home, the deed clutched in my hand, I watched Marcus's face contort from shock to a simmering rage. His eyes darted to Avery as if blaming her for my presence, for this impossible reality. "What is this, Vivian?" he snarled, finally finding his voice, though it was rough, strained. "Some kind of sick joke? You think you can just waltz in here and, what, take over?" I ignored him. My gaze was fixed on Avery. Her eyes, wide and glistening, met mine. Slowly, Deliberately, I extended my hand, offering her the folded deed. She looked at it, then at me, then back at the paper, as if it were a fragile bird that might fly away. Her fingers, trembling, reached out and took it. She held it like it was made of spun glass, her knuckles white. A tear escaped her eye, tracing a path down her cheek, then another. She started to cry, silent, racking sobs that shook her thin frame. But she didn't speak. She just held the deed, her gaze fixed on it, tears streaming down her face. Marcus, meanwhile, was sputtering. "This is impossible. I didn't sell this house. This is my house." "It was," I corrected him, my voice flat. "The bank foreclosed. I bought it at auction. Legally, it's all there." I gestured to the deed in Avery's hand. He lunged for it, but Avery instinctively recoiled, clutching the paper to her chest. His eyes narrowed, blazing with a familiar fury. He looked like he wanted to strike her, but my presence, my unyielding gaze, held him back. "You have 30 days," I said, my voice cutting through the tension, "to vacate the premises." Marcus opened his mouth, probably to unleash a torrent of threats and insults. But I was already turning, pulling out my phone. I tapped a contact, put the phone to my ear. "Hi, I need a locksmith," I said into the receiver, my voice clear and calm. "Yes, immediately. I just took possession of a property and I need the locks changed. The address is 1422 Elm Street." The locksmith arrived within the hour, a no-nonsense woman with a tool belt and a knowing smirk. Marcus had retreated into the house, slamming the door, but I could feel his furious gaze through the windows. Avery was still standing by the door, clutching the deed, her face a mask of shock and tears. I gently steered her away, telling her to sit down, that everything would be okay. She just nodded, dazed. While the locksmith worked, I started exploring the house, a ghost in my own home. The living room was still cluttered with Marcus's ugly, oversized furniture. The kitchen, once my mother's domain, felt sterile and unused. It was like walking through a museum of a life I'd left behind. But nothing felt quite right. The air was heavy with unspoken words, years of tension. Then I got to it. The hallway leading to what used to be my bedroom. Marcus had indeed put up a new wall, creating a small, separate apartment. There was a new, cheaper-looking door where my old one used to be. I tried the handle. Locked. "Excuse me," a voice said from behind me. I turned to see the locksmith, key in hand. "Just finished the main doors? Did you want this one changed too?" She gestured to the new door. "Yes, please," I said, handing her the key I'd used to get in. "And I need a new key for this one, too. I believe there's still a tenant in there." She nodded, already pulling out her tools. "No problem." A few minutes later, the new lock clicked. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The room was different. The floral wallpaper my mother and I had picked out was gone, replaced by a bland off-white paint. My old built-in bookshelves were gone too, replaced by a cheap flat-pack wardrobe. But the window was still the same, looking out onto the backyard where I used to spend hours reading under the old oak tree. And there, sitting at a small desk, was a guy, late 20s maybe. He looked up startled, his headphones falling to his shoulders. He had dark, curly hair and a slightly rumpled t-shirt. He looked as surprised to see me as I was to see him, though I'd expected a tenant. Hey," he said, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Can I help you?" "Hi," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. "My name is Vivian Burton. I just bought this house. All of it." I gestured vaguely around the room, "and this used to be my bedroom." His eyes widened. He looked around the room, then back at me, a slow understanding dawning on his face. "Oh, right. So, you're the new landlord." Effectively, I confirmed, and I'm giving you 30 days' notice to vacate. He blinked. 30 days? Wow. Okay, I guess I should have seen this coming. Marcus has been weird lately, missing rent payments, talking about liquidity issues. He rubbed the back of his neck. My name's Hamza, by the way. Hamza Lopez. Nice to meet you, Hamza, I said, a small, genuine smile touching my lips. He seemed cooperative, which was a relief. I apologize for the abruptness. It's complicated. No worries, he said, standing up. He was shorter than I expected, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. Honestly, I'm not surprised. This place has been a revolving door of tenants since I moved in a few months ago. Marcus is not a great landlord, and he's always seemed a bit off. I nodded, already knowing that much. Well, I'll be in touch about the official paperwork. Just wanted to introduce myself. As I turned to leave, Hamza stopped me. Oh, wait, before you go. I found this in one of the desk drawers when I moved in. It looked important, but I didn't know what to do with it. It was tucked way in the back. He reached into a drawer of the cheap desk and pulled out a small black USB stick. It has MB written on it. Marcus's initials, I guess. I figured it was his, but he never asked for it back, and I didn't want to snoop. He held it out to me. My heart gave a little lurch. A USB stick belonging to Marcus. My mind immediately went to the shady ventures Gianna had mentioned. Thank you, Hamza, I said, taking it. It felt cold and small in my hand, but potentially heavy with secrets. I appreciate it. I left Hamza to his packing and went to find my mother. She was sitting on the old sofa, still holding the deed, looking utterly lost. Marcus was nowhere in sight. Mom? I sat beside her. Are you okay? She finally looked at me, her eyes still red-rimmed. Vivian, what have you done? Her voice was barely a whisper. He's going to be furious. He already is, I said gently, but he can't do anything. This is legal, and this house is ours now, not just his. She just shook her head, tears welling up again. You don't understand. You don't know what he's capable of. I think I do, I said, a bitterness creeping into my voice. He sold my room. He told me I was never coming back. He made you whisper secrets on the phone. I know what he's capable of. Later that evening, after the initial shock had worn off a bit, I called Gianna. She was my childhood best friend, 31 now, still loyal and wonderfully sarcastic. We met at a quiet bar downtown, a place far enough from the old neighborhood. Vivian Burton, she said, raising her glass of wine, her eyes sparkling. You actually did it. I heard rumors, but I didn't believe it. You bought the house? I did, I confirmed, taking a sip of my own wine. It was cathartic and messy. Marcus is livid. Oh, I can imagine, Gianna chuckled, then her expression sobered. He's been a mess for a while. You know, I heard some things from my cousin who works at the county clerk's office. Rumors about Marcus burning through money, specifically money that was supposed to be for your college trust fund. My blood ran cold. My college trust. Marcus had always been vague about it, saying it was invested wisely and safe, but I'd never seen a statement, never confirmed its existence beyond his word. What kind of rumors? I asked, my voice tight. Just that he was liquidating assets, making some really questionable investments. My cousin said she saw some paperwork related to a trust in your name, but it looked like it had been emptied years ago. She couldn't say for sure, but it was just chatter around the office. A cold knot formed in my stomach. The USB stick in my bag suddenly felt like a ticking time bomb. Thanks, Gianna, I said, forcing a smile. I appreciate the heads up. Just don't let it consume you, Viv, she warned, her hand reaching across the table to squeeze mine. Revenge is a dish best served cold, but don't freeze yourself in the process. I nodded, but my mind was already racing. The USB. Marcus's shady dealings, my college trust. It was all starting to connect. The USB stick felt like it was burning a hole in my bag. After leaving Gianna, I drove straight back to the house. Marcus was still holed up somewhere, probably stewing. Avery was in the kitchen, quietly wiping down counters that were already spotless. She looked up when I came in, her eyes still haunted. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice light, "I'm just going to use the office for a bit." "Need to check some emails." She nodded, not meeting my gaze. "Okay, dear." I went into Marcus's home office, a room I rarely entered growing up. It smelled faintly of stale coffee and old paper. His desk was a chaotic mess of bills, half-eaten snacks, and a laptop. I pulled out my own laptop, plugged in the USB. The files popped up instantly. My breath hitched. It wasn't just a few documents. It was a digital archive of Marcus's financial life laid bare. Shady business plans indeed. There were folders labeled Phoenix Ventures and Global Innovations, names that screamed scam. Inside, I found forged LLC paperwork, shell company registrations, and a dizzying array of complex, convoluted transactions. It was a labyrinth of deceit. My fingers flew across the trackpad, opening file after file. Then I saw it, a folder simply labeled Trust. My heart pounded. I clicked it open. Inside were old bank statements, legal documents, and a series of detailed spreadsheets. My name was on them, Vivian Burton, date of birth 1998. The trust fund established by my paternal grandmother for my college education had been substantial, enough to cover tuition, living expenses, everything. It had been fully funded when I was 18, and then a series of withdrawals, large ones, not for tuition, not for books, not for anything related to my education. The dates corresponded to my freshman year of college, then sophomore, then junior. Each withdrawal was followed by a transfer to an account I didn't recognize, then a series of purchases labeled crypto investment, Bitcoin, Ethereum, all the buzzwords from a few years ago. The last few files in the folder were grim screenshots of crypto exchange accounts showing massive losses. The dates lined up with the crypto crash a few years back. He hadn't just dipped into my trust fund. He gambled it all away on speculative, volatile assets and lost every penny. The fund, which should have been worth well over $200,000 by now, was empty, zero balance. My vision blurred with a hot, furious haze. This wasn't just about selling my room. This was about stealing my future, my security, my independence. He hadn't just dismissed my art dreams. He'd actively sabotaged my ability to pursue them without financial strain, forcing me to work twice as hard, to claw my way up from nothing. I took a shaky breath, trying to calm the tremor in my hands. I needed to show Avery. She deserved to know. I found her still in the kitchen, meticulously arranging spice jars. "Mom," I said, my voice tight with suppressed rage, "can you come to the office for a minute? I need to show you something." She followed me, her steps hesitant. I pulled up the trust folder on the laptop screen. "Look at this." She peered at the screen, her brow furrowed. As she read the file names, her eyes widened. When she saw the bank statements, the withdrawals, the crypto investment labels, her face crumpled. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "No, he wouldn't. He said it was safe. He said he diversified it." "He lied, Mom," I said, pointing to the empty balance. "He took it all, and he lost it." Avery sank into Marcus's desk chair, her hands covering her mouth. Tears streamed down her face, silent and endless. She rocked back and forth, a low, keening sound escaping her lips. "I knew," she finally choked out, the words muffled by her hands. "I always suspected. He was always so secretive about it. He'd never show me the statements. He'd say it was too complicated for me to understand, but I never thought he'd actually empty it." Her shame was palpable, a heavy weight in the room, but beneath it I saw a flicker of something else, disbelief and a nascent anger. My own rage, however, was fully formed. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about justice. This was about every condescending remark, every time he told me my art was worthless, every time he'd scoffed at my dreams. He hadn't just been dismissive, he'd been actively undermining me, stealing from me, while pretending to be the benevolent, financially responsible father. I spent the rest of the day and most of the night meticulously downloading and organizing every relevant document from the USB. I categorized them: forged LLCs, crypto losses, trust fund theft, shady business deals. I sent a secure encrypted copy to Milo. "I need a lawyer," I typed in the accompanying message. "A good one. This isn't just about the house anymore. This is fraud, and I'm going to make him pay." Milo's reply was immediate. "On it. I know just the firm." "Don't do anything rash. Just keep gathering evidence." As I worked, the memories flooded back, sharper, more painful now that I understood the true depths of his betrayal. Flashback 4. I was 15, working on a large canvas for an art competition. Marcus walked in, took one look at my half-finished painting, a vibrant, abstract piece, and scoffed. "Still wasting your time with that, Vivian. Don't you have a history paper due?" "That's what actually matters." He then picked up a small, finished sketch I'd done, a quick portrait of my mother, and without a word, ripped it in half. "Focus," he'd said, dropping the pieces into the trash. Flashback 5. The day I got my acceptance letter to art school with a partial scholarship. I was so proud. I showed it to him, hoping for a flicker of approval. He just read it, then looked up, his face impassive. "A partial scholarship, so you still need money. And for what? To draw pretty pictures? You'll be drowning in debt, Vivian. You'll never make a living." He'd made me feel like a fool for even trying. He hadn't just been a dismissive father. He'd been a thief, a con artist, and he'd stolen from his own daughter. I continued sifting through the files, my anger a cold, steady flame. Then, tucked away in a subfolder labeled Old Policies, I found it. A life insurance policy in my name, Vivian Burton. The beneficiary was listed as Marcus Burton, and beneath it a cancellation notice, dated 3 years ago. He hadn't just stolen my trust fund. He'd taken out a life insurance policy on me with himself as the beneficiary and then canceled it. The implication was chilling. He'd been planning something, or, more likely, he'd just been using me as another one of his investments, another potential payout, and then discarded it when it no longer served his purpose. My hand trembled as I stared at the document. This wasn't just about money. This was about a profound, sickening lack of regard for my very existence. The life insurance policy canceled 3 years ago haunted me. It was a cold, calculated detail that chilled me more than the lost trust fund. It spoke of a deeper, more disturbing disregard. I closed the laptop, needing a break from the digital evidence of Marcus's depravity. I found Avery in the living room, staring blankly at the television. She looked utterly defeated. The raw emotion from seeing the trust fund documents had drained her, leaving her hollow. "Mom," I said, sitting beside her. We need to talk, really talk. She flinched as if expecting a reprimand. About what, Vivian? What more is there to say? About everything, I insisted gently. About him, about why you stayed, about us. I paused, then asked the question that had been nagging at me since that night in the dorm. Did you ever try to contact me after I left for college? After he said I wasn't coming back? Her eyes darted away, a familiar flicker of shame and fear. I tried. Her voice was barely a whisper. I wrote you letters. My heart leaped. Letters? What letters? I never got any letters. Her gaze dropped to her lap. He intercepted them. He said it was for your own good, to make sure you focused on your studies, not on distractions from home. He said you needed to learn independence. She wrung her hands. He always said he knew best. A fresh wave of anger, cold and sharp, washed over me. Not only had he stolen my money, he'd stolen my mother's attempts to reach out, her quiet acts of love. He'd isolated me, cut me off, all under the guise of tough love. Where are they? I asked, my voice tight. The letters. Where did he put them? Avery hesitated, then slowly lifted her head. In his workshop, in the garage. There's a locked drawer in his workbench. He keeps his important papers there. Behind the tool manuals. I didn't wait. I walked straight to the garage, the key to the main house still in my pocket. The garage was Marcus's sanctuary, a place where he tinkered with old engines and organized his tools, which usually meant leaving them in piles. I found the heavy wooden workbench scarred with years of neglect. Sure enough, there was a small locked drawer. I tried the main house key. It slid in, turned. The lock clicked open. Inside, tucked behind a stack of greasy car manuals and a few rusted wrenches, was a small, dusty box. My name was scrawled on it in my mother's neat handwriting, Vivian. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were 3 envelopes, slightly yellowed with age, each addressed to me, each with a different date, spanning my first 3 years of college. I took them back to my old room, the one Hamza was now packing up. He was quietly folding clothes, giving me a wide berth. I sat on the edge of the bed, the letters in my hand. I didn't open them in front of Avery. This felt too private, too raw. The first letter, dated a few months after I left for college, was filled with mundane updates about the house, the garden, the neighbors. But beneath the surface, I could feel her ache, her loneliness. I miss you, sweetie, she'd written. The house feels so quiet without you. Your father is busy. I hope you're eating well. Are you making friends? The second from my sophomore year was more direct. Your father says you're doing well. I hope you are. I worry about you. He doesn't like me calling you, says you need to focus. But I just wanted to tell you I love you, and I'm proud of you, no matter what. The third, from my junior year, was the most heartbreaking. It was shorter, more desperate. Vivian, I don't know if you're getting these. Your father says you're too busy to talk. He says you're doing well, but I never hear from you. Please know I think of you every day. I hope you're happy. Don't forget me. Love, Mom. Tears streamed down my face, hot and furious. He hadn't just stolen my money. He'd stolen years of communication, years of my mother's quiet support, years of connection. He'd made me believe she didn't care, or that she was too weak to reach out. He'd made her believe I had forgotten her. Meanwhile, Marcus was not taking his eviction notice well. I had seen him pacing, shouting into his phone. Later that day, Hamza came out of his room looking uneasy. Vivian, he said, approaching me cautiously, Marcus just tried to bribe me. He offered me a month's free rent cash if I refused to leave. Said he'd make it legally difficult for you to get me out. Said I could squat here and cause you headaches. My jaw tightened. And what did you say? Hamza gave a wry smile. I told him I'd think about it. But I wouldn't actually do that to you. Honestly, he's losing it. He's been asking me a lot of weird questions about tax laws, about how long someone can hide assets. He even asked me if I knew anyone at the IRS. I stared at him. Why would he ask you that? Hamza hesitated, then sighed. Okay, look, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I'm an IRS contractor. I'm between contracts right now doing some short-term rentals, but that's my field, tax fraud investigation. And Marcus, he's been on my radar for a while, not officially, not on a case file, but I've heard his name come up in whispers. Shady investments, tax evasion. He's being investigated, Vivian, not just by me, but by the agency. He's a known quantity. My mind reeled. An IRS contractor, Hamza, the USB. It all clicked into place with a terrifying, exhilarating force. This wasn't just about my personal revenge anymore. This was bigger. Hamza, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The USB stick you gave me, it's full of evidence. Forged LLCs, crypto losses, the trust fund. It's all there. Proof of fraud. His eyes widened. Seriously? That's huge. That's enough to bring him down. The next morning, I was on the phone with Milo. I have everything, I told him, my voice firm. The trust fund, the shady businesses, the life insurance policy, and I have a witness, an IRS contractor who can corroborate his shady dealings. Milo was silent for a moment. Vivian, he said, his voice serious, this isn't just about getting your money back anymore. This is a full-blown legal battle. Are you ready for this? I'm ready, I said, my gaze fixed on the letters in my hand. More than ready. I hired the lawyer Milo recommended, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Chen. I laid out all the evidence, showed her the USB contents, explained Hamza's role. She listened, her expression grim. Ms. Burton, she said, closing my file, based on this evidence, we can certainly pursue charges for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty regarding the trust, and potentially even elder abuse regarding your mother's financial situation. This is a strong case. Good, I said, my voice cold. File it, all of it. The charges were filed that afternoon, not just for the house, but for everything. The legal wheels started turning faster than I expected. Ms. Chen was a shark, exactly what I needed. She filed the fraud charges, the breach of fiduciary duty regarding the trust, and even explored avenues for elder abuse regarding my mother's financial vulnerability under Marcus's control. The sheer volume of evidence from the USB, coupled with Hamza's professional insight, made it a solid, undeniable case. But I wasn't content to let the legal system be the only source of justice. I wanted Marcus to feel the public shame he deserved. I wanted his carefully constructed facade to crumble, not just in a courtroom, but in plain sight. I compiled a concise, anonymous package of the most damning documents, the forged LLC papers, the crypto losses tied to the trust fund, and a brief factual summary of his predatory business practices. I sent it without a return address to the local newspaper's investigative desk. The article hit 2 days later. Local businessman under scrutiny, allegations of fraud and mismanagement. It didn't name Marcus directly, but it detailed the types of shell companies and investment schemes he was known for. It mentioned a recent property foreclosure and allegations of misappropriated funds. It was enough. Almost immediately, the phone calls started, not for me, but for Marcus. I heard him shouting, pacing the living room. His shady businesses, as Gianna had called them, started unraveling. Investors, spooked by the article and perhaps already suspicious, began pulling out. His network of dubious associates started distancing themselves. The house, which was still technically his until the 30-day notice was up, became a pressure cooker. Avery, meanwhile, was undergoing her own quiet revolution. The letters, the truth about the trust fund, and my relentless pursuit of justice seemed to have finally chipped away at her decades of emotional paralysis. One morning I found her in the kitchen, a determined set to her jaw. "I called a lawyer," she said, her voice trembling slightly, but firm. "A divorce lawyer." My heart swelled with a mix of relief and pride. "Mom, that's incredible." She nodded, her eyes meeting mine directly for the first time in years without flinching. "I can't do this anymore, Vivian. I can't live like this. He's broken me down for so long. I stayed because I was afraid of being alone, afraid of what he'd do, afraid of losing everything." She took a deep, shuddering breath. "I stayed for stability," I told myself, "for you. But it wasn't for you. It was for me, and it was the wrong reason. It was fear, not love." That confession, raw and vulnerable, was a revelation. It wasn't about love, it was about survival, about the insidious grip of emotional abuse. And now she was finally breaking free. Marcus's unraveling escalated. He'd stomped through the house, screaming at Avery, at me, at the walls. He'd accused me of ruining his life, of being a greedy, ungrateful bitch. He even tried to get Hamza to lie for him, to say the USB was planted, but Hamza, bless his honest soul, refused. One afternoon, Marcus's rage boiled over in front of the neighbors. He was out in the front yard shouting into his phone, clearly trying to salvage some doomed deal. Mrs. Henderson, our elderly next-door neighbor, was watering her prize-winning petunias. "You think you can just take everything from me?" he roared into the phone, his voice carrying clearly across the manicured lawns. "You think I'm going to let that ungrateful daughter of mine walk all over me? She's a nobody, a failure. Her art is worthless. She's always been a drain." Mrs. Henderson, usually so polite and reserved, stopped watering, her eyes wide with shock. Other neighbors, drawn by the commotion, peered out their windows. Marcus didn't care. He was a man possessed, his carefully constructed facade shattered. He was revealing his true self, raw and ugly, for the entire street to see. It was a public spectacle, and it was glorious. Later that week, with the court date looming and Marcus's world crumbling around him, I walked into what was left of my old room. Hamza had moved out, leaving it empty save for a few dust bunnies. The bland off-white walls felt like a blank canvas. I went to my car, pulled out the supplies I'd bought weeks ago and laid them out. Brushes, paints, a drop cloth. I taped off the baseboards, then began to work. The first stroke was a deep, fiery red, then orange, then gold. I painted with an intensity I hadn't felt in years, channeling every ounce of anger, every memory of dismissal, every stolen dream into the swirling colors. I painted the flames first, consuming the walls, erasing the blandness, erasing the memory of it being rented out. Then from the heart of the inferno I painted it, a massive, majestic phoenix, its wings spread wide, powerful and defiant, its eyes burning with a fierce reborn light. It wasn't just a bird, it was a symbol of resilience, of rising from the ashes, of taking back what was lost and transforming it into something stronger, more beautiful. The mural covered the entire wall, a vibrant, defiant explosion of color and meaning. It was a declaration. This wasn't just a room anymore. It was a statement. and it was mine. The courtroom was sterile, hushed, and utterly devoid of the dramatic flair you see in movies. No grand speeches, no sudden gasps from the gallery, just the cold, hard facts laid out by Ms. Chen. The air was thick with tension, but I felt strangely calm. This wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about accountability. Marcus sat at the defense table, flanked by his own lawyer, a nervous-looking man who kept adjusting his tie. My father looked smaller than I remembered, his usual bluster replaced by a pale, drawn expression. The public humiliation, the crumbling businesses, the impending divorce, it had taken its toll. He still shot me venomous glances, but they lacked their usual bite. Ms. Chen laid out the case meticulously. The forged LLC documents, the paper trail of the crypto investments, the massive losses, the empty trust fund. She brought in financial experts who testified to the fraudulent nature of Marcus's ventures. Hamza Lopez, looking sharp in a suit, took the stand and calmly explained his background as an IRS contractor, detailing how Marcus had tried to bribe him and his own prior suspicions about Marcus's tax evasion. His testimony was damning, lending an air of official authority to my claims. When it was my turn, I walked to the stand, my spine straight. I answered every question calmly, factually. I presented the USB contents, explained how I found them, and detailed the impact of his actions. I talked about the trust fund, the stolen money, the years of struggle I'd faced because of his theft. I didn't raise my voice, didn't shed a tear, just presented the truth unvarnished. Marcus's lawyer tried to paint me as a greedy, vindictive daughter, motivated by spite rather than justice. "Ms. Burton," he droned, "isn't it true that you purchased this property out from under your father, despite his long-standing ownership?" "I purchased it legally at auction after the bank foreclosed due to his missed payments," I replied, my voice steady. "He chose to default on his mortgage. I chose to reclaim what was mine." "And isn't it true that you have a history of animosity towards your father stemming from his disapproval of your artistic pursuits?" "My father dismissed my career as useless and a hobby," I stated, meeting his gaze directly. "He also stole my college trust fund, which would have supported those pursuits. I believe my actions are a direct response to his financial and emotional abuse, not animosity." He had no answer for that. The judge, a stern, older woman, seemed to weigh my words carefully. Then, the moment I hadn't dared to fully hope for. Ms. Chen called Avery to the stand. My mother, who had spent decades shrinking into herself, now stood before the court. She looked terrified, her hands clasped tightly, but there was a new, fragile strength in her eyes. "Mrs. Burton," Ms. Chen began gently, "can you tell the court about your financial situation during your marriage to Mr. Burton?" Avery took a deep breath. Her voice was soft at first, but it gained strength as she spoke. "Marcus always handled everything. He said I wasn't good with money. He controlled all the accounts. I didn't even have access to my own savings for years. He told me it was for my protection." She then spoke about the trust fund, how Marcus had always been vague, how she'd suspected something was wrong but was too afraid to challenge him. She spoke about the intercepted letters, her voice cracking as she recounted her desperate attempts to reach me and his cruel dismissals. "He told me Vivian didn't want to talk to me," she whispered, her gaze finding mine across the courtroom. "He said she was too busy, that she'd forgotten about me. He made me feel worthless, like I was nothing without him. He took my voice." Her eyes welled up, but she didn't break. "But my daughter, Vivian, she gave it back to me. She showed me I don't have to be afraid anymore." A collective murmur went through the courtroom. Marcus's face was a mask of fury, but he couldn't interrupt. Avery's testimony was raw, vulnerable, and utterly condemning. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the emotional violence, the control, the systemic abuse that had defined their marriage. The judge listened intently, her expression unreadable. When Avery finished, she looked directly at Marcus, then back at me. The verdict came swiftly. Marcus Burton was found liable for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. He was ordered to pay full restitution for the stolen trust fund, plus significant damages. The judge also issued an immediate order for him to vacate the house within 10 days, citing the clear evidence of his fraudulent activities and the need to protect Avery. Marcus exploded. He leaped to his feet, shouting obscenities, but his lawyer quickly restrained him. He was dragged out of the courtroom by bailiffs, still sputtering threats. I watched him go, a profound sense of emptiness, not triumph, settling over me. The revenge was complete, the karma delivered. But there was no smile on my face, just a quiet, weary satisfaction. I turned to my mother, who was still standing, tears streaming down her face, but a faint, hopeful light in her eyes. "We're taking our house back, Mom," I said, my voice soft but firm. The judge then cleared her throat. "Ms. Burton, the court is also awarding you an additional sum of $200,000 in punitive damages, given the egregious nature of the fraud and emotional distress caused." My eyes widened. $200,000, an unexpected windfall. I thought about the years of struggling, the late nights, the sacrifices. It was more than I'd ever expected. But as I looked at my mother, then at the empty space where Marcus had been, I knew what I had to do. "Your Honor," I said, my voice clear, "I appreciate the award, but I would like to request that the punitive damages, the $200,000, be donated to a scholarship fund, specifically a scholarship for young women from broken homes who want to pursue careers in the arts." A ripple went through the courtroom. The judge's stern expression softened slightly. "A very commendable gesture, Ms. Burton. The court will ensure that is done." It wasn't about the money for me. It was about the principle. It was about making sure no other young woman had her dreams dismissed, her future stolen, her spirit broken by someone who claimed to love her. It was about turning pain into purpose. The scent of freshly cut wood and new paint hung in the air, a stark contrast to the stale, heavy atmosphere that had clung to the house for years. It had been 3 months since the gavel fell, since Marcus was dragged from the courtroom, since Avery and I started truly breathing again. 3 months of demolition, renovation, and rebuilding, not just the house, but ourselves. The living room, once cluttered with Marcus's dark, oppressive furniture, was now bright and airy. The walls were a soft, warm gray, adorned with some of my own framed prints. Sunlight streamed through the newly installed larger windows, illuminating the polished hardwood floors. It felt like a different house entirely, a place of light and possibility. My old room, where the Phoenix mural still blazed defiantly on the wall, was now a guest room, a vibrant testament to defiance. The true heart of my operation, my art studio, was in the basement. We gutted the damp, dusty space, poured new concrete, and installed proper lighting and ventilation. It was a haven of creativity, filled with my digital tablets, drawing supplies, and a large, comfortable desk. Down here, surrounded by my tools and my art, I felt truly grounded, truly home. Upstairs, the kitchen, once Avery's quiet prison, was now her stage. I walked in to find her dancing barefoot across the new tile floor, humming along to some upbeat jazz music playing softly from a small speaker. Her hair, once perpetually pulled back in a tight bun, was loose, a few silver strands catching the light. She was wearing a brightly colored apron, a smudge of flour on her cheek. She looked alive, vibrant. The woman I vaguely remembered from my earliest childhood memories before Marcus's shadow had consumed her. "Morning, Viv," she sang, twirling around. "Pancakes are almost ready." "Morning, Mom," I grinned, grabbing a mug for coffee. "You're practically glowing." She laughed, a genuine, joyful sound I hadn't heard in years. "I feel like I'm finally breathing for the first time. No more tiptoeing, no more whispers, just me." Gianna was a frequent visitor, often dropping by with takeout and sarcastic commentary. She'd sprawled on the new sofa, kicking her feet up. "Honestly, Viv, this place is unrecognizable. Good job. Though I still think you should have painted a giant middle finger on the front door just for old time's sake." "The phoenix is more symbolic," I'd retorted, but I appreciated her bluntness. She kept me honest. Milo spent most weekends here now. He'd often join me in the studio, quietly working on his own laptop while I sketched, or just sitting and reading. He was my anchor, the calm presence that kept me from drifting too far into the past. My business, Vivian Designs, was absolutely booming. The court case, ironically, had given me a strange kind of notoriety. Clients loved the story of the artist who bought her house back from her fraudulent father. It was a hell of a brand narrative. Sometimes late at night when the house was quiet, I'd sit in the living room staring at the empty fireplace. I'd think about Marcus. He was gone, out of our lives, facing the consequences of his actions. I'd heard through Hamza, who occasionally sent me an update, that Marcus was facing further investigations. His financial world completely collapsed. He was living with a distant cousin, stripped of his power and his carefully constructed image. Was it justice, or was it vengeance? The line felt blurry, indistinct. I hadn't smiled when he was dragged from the courtroom. There was no triumphant cheer, just a profound sense of necessity. It had to happen. For me, for Avery. For the girl whose room was sold, whose dreams were dismissed, whose trust was stolen. Forgiveness? Not yet. Maybe never. His actions had left scars too deep, too fundamental. But the pain wasn't consuming me anymore. It had been restructured, as the outline said, into power. The power to create, to protect, to build something real and lasting. The final touch came a few weeks ago. I found it tucked away in an old box of my mother's, carefully preserved. It was a drawing I'd done when I was 6, a crayon portrait of our family, crude and colorful. The one Marcus had ripped up and thrown away, telling me to focus on something real. Avery had secretly taped it back together, smoothed out the creases, and kept it. I had it professionally framed. It hung now proudly above the fireplace in the living room, the focal point of our new home. Beneath it I'd affixed a small brass plate, simple, understated, yet powerful. It read, "She came back. He sold a room I claimed a woman's birthright."
The mahogany doors of my father's study felt heavier than I remembered. Maybe it was the weight of what waited on the other side. A room full of people who'd spent years pretending I didn't exist, gathered to divide up what remained of Vincent Richards' empire. I'm Claire, the daughter who dared to question, to challenge, to be different. The ungrateful one, they called me. Now here I stood, 31 years old, about to face them all again. "Miss Richards?" The family lawyer, Mr. Patterson, gestured for me to enter. "We're ready to begin." I stepped into the familiar study, the scent of leather and old books hitting me like a physical force. Christian sat in my father's chair, of course he did, while Aunt Julia perched nearby, her perfectly manicured hands clasped in her lap. Willow offered a slight smile from her corner, quickly looking away when her brother shot her a glance. "Now that everyone is present," Patterson began, adjusting his glasses, We'll proceed with the reading of Vincent Richards' last will and testament. I remained standing by the door, arms crossed. No one offered me a seat. To my beloved nephew Christian, Patterson read, I leave the family estate, including the vineyard and all associated businesses, along with liquid assets totaling $2.4 million. Christian's smile grew wider. Julia dapped at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. To my daughter, Claire. Patterson paused, clearing his throat. I leave this message. You are never grateful enough to deserve a legacy. Your constant questioning of family traditions and values has shown me that you cannot be trusted with what generations have built. Perhaps this final lesson will help you understand the cost of defiance. The silence that followed felt like glass about to shatter. That's it? I heard myself ask, my voice steadier than I felt. Nothing else? There are some personal effects, Patterson continued, which have been designated for various charitable organisations. The locket? I interrupted. My mother's locket? That's been allocated to the family collection, Christian said smoothly. Where it belongs. I looked at him then. Really looked at him. My cousin sat there in his tailored suit, not a hair out of place, wearing the same expression he'd had the day of my mother's funeral, practised concern, masking satisfaction. You know she wanted me to have that, I said quietly. Your mother's wishes were rather confused near the end, Julia interjected. We all know that, dear. Something in her tone made my skin crawl. I'd heard rumours about those final days, about documents being signed, about my mother's increasingly agitated state. Well, I said, straightening my shoulders, I suppose that's that. There is one more thing, Patterson added, pulling out an envelope. Your father requested this be read aloud. My stomach tightened. One final twist of the knife. Und, Claire, Patterson read. If you're here, it means you still harbour some hope of claiming what isn't yours. Let this be clear. Your mother's share of the estate, which you so desperately believed would pass to you, was legally transferred before her death. There is nothing left for you here. Nothing was ever yours to claim. Christian stood, buttoning his jacket. I think we're finished here. Shall we move to the dining room? The staff has prepared brunch. The others rose, filing past me like I was already gone. Only Willow hesitated. Claire, she whispered. I'm sorry. I watched them go, their voices fading down the hallway. Through the study window, I could see the vineyard stretching toward the horizon, rows of vines my mother had loved, where she taught me about patience and growth and timing. Patterson began gathering his papers. Ms. Richards, if you'd like a copy of the documentation... No, I said, turning toward the door. I won't need it. I walked slowly through the house, past the family portraits where my face had been gradually excluded, past the kitchen where my mother used to sneak me cookies after father's rages, past the grand staircase where I'd last seen her alive. Their laughter drifted from the dining room as I reached the front door. Christian's voice rose above the others, already discussing his plans for modernising the vineyard operations. I paused, my hand on the doorknob, and whispered words meant only for myself. Enjoy it while it lasts. The morning sun hit my face as I stepped outside. I didn't look back at the house, didn't need to. I knew exactly what I'd see. Everything they thought they'd taken from me, everything they believed they owned. They had no idea what I'd learned in the years of exile, no idea what I'd built, what I'd discovered. They thought this was an ending. I smiled, walking to my car. They were wrong. This was just the beginning. 3 months after the will reading, I sat in a small office overlooking the Pacific, watching my new lawyer review documents I'd spent years collecting. This is interesting, Kenneth said, spreading papers across his desk. Very interesting. I sipped my coffee, waiting. Kenneth wasn't like the polished attorneys my family employed. His office was modest, his suit off the rack, but his eyes missed nothing. Your mother's will, he continued, was modified 3 times in her final week. That's unusual enough. But look at these signature variations. He laid out 3 documents side by side. See how the strokes get progressively shakier? She was sick, I said, the memory sharp as glass. But not that sick, not at first. Kenneth leaned back. Tell me about those days. I set down my cup. I was away at college. Aunt Julia called, said Mom was having episodes. When I got home, they wouldn't let me see her, said she was too fragile, needed rest. Christian was always there, always in meetings with my father. And then, 3 days later she was gone. They said it was her heart. Kenneth nodded slowly, making notes. And the bank holding the estate's debt. You're sure it's struggling? I pulled out my laptop, showing him the research I'd compiled while working my quiet desk job in this coastal town. Pacific Trust Bank. They're carrying millions in bad loans. The vineyard's debt is just one piece, but it's significant. You've done your homework, Kenneth said, impressed. But buying debt notes isn't cheap, even distressed ones. I opened another file. Remember last year's cryptocurrency surge? I invested early. Made some careful moves in tech startups too. I've got the funds. Claire, Kenneth set down his pen. What exactly do you want here? The ocean stretched beyond his window, vast and patient, like my plan. I want everything they took, I said simply, and I want them to watch it happen. A knock interrupted us. Kenneth's assistant poked her head in. Sir, there's a call from the vineyard's management office. Something about missed payments? Kenneth raised an eyebrow at me. I nodded. Put it through, he said. The speaker crackled. This is Ryder Newman, vineyard foreman. I'm trying to reach someone about our account status. Mr. Newman, Kenneth answered, I represent an interested party. What seems to be the problem? Our operating loans are overdue. Christian assured us everything was handled, but the bank's threatening to call the note. I smiled. Christian, always better at appearances than actualities. After the call, Kenneth studied me. You knew about this? Christian's been running the place like his personal party venue, more interested in hosting influencers than managing crops. The books are a mess. And you're planning to buy the debt, I finished. Through a shell company. Once Pacific Trust starts selling off assets, we move. Kenneth whistled softly. Revenge served with paperwork. I like it. That evening, I walked along the beach near my rented cottage, remembering another conversation from years ago. I was 16, fighting with my father about college choices. You're just like your mother, he'd sneered, always wanting to change things, question things. This family has a way of doing business. Mum had found me later, crying in the garden. Listen to me, Claire, she'd said, her voice urgent. Whatever happens, remember, patience is power. They think money is strength, but timing is everything. A week later, she started acting strange. 2 weeks later, she was dead. My phone buzzed, a text from Willow. Missing you, family dinner tonight. Christian announcing big vineyard plans. Wish you were here. I didn't respond. Willow meant well, but she was still one of them. Instead, I called Kenneth. I need everything you can find about my mother's last days, I said when he answered. Medical records, visitors, especially any meetings with lawyers. Already on it, he replied. But Claire, I found something odd. The original will, the one from before that final week, it's missing from the county records, like it never existed. I stopped walking, waves crashing at my feet. How is that possible? Someone with access. Someone who knew exactly what to remove. The pieces clicked. Christian's constant presence. The locked doors, the missing documents. Keep digging, I said. And Kenneth, set up that shell company. It's time to move. After hanging up, I watched the sun sink into the ocean. Mum used to say the vineyard's best grapes came from vines that struggled, that fought through poor soil and harsh conditions. The sweetest wine, she'd tell me, comes from survivors. I took out my laptop and began typing. Offer to purchase debt notes, Pacific Trust Bank. The numbers were substantial, but I had them. Years of quiet investing, of living below my means, of preparing for exactly this moment. Somewhere inland, my family was raising glasses, celebrating their victory, never suspecting that their perfect heir was drowning in debt, or that their discarded daughter was about to become their owner. I hit send on the offer. Let them drink their wine. Soon they'd taste what betrayal had been brewing all along. The vineyard looked different in winter. Bare vines stretched like skeleton fingers against the grey sky as I walked the perimeter, careful to stay hidden behind the old storage buildings. Ryder, the foreman, was waiting for me by the abandoned wine cellar. Ms. Rivers, he said, using my alias. Didn't expect the bank's representative to come in person. I like to be thorough, I replied, pulling my coat tighter. Show me what's really happening here. Ryder led me through the property, pointing out problems Christian had been hiding. Equipment lay rusting, whole sections of vines showed signs of disease, And when the new wine storage facility, Christian's pet project, stood half finished. He spent 400,000 on that, Ryder said, gesturing to the concrete shell. Then the contractors walked when the checks bounced. And the workers? 3 months behind on payroll. Most stayed because of loyalty to the land, not the man. We reached the main house. Through the windows, I could see Christian hosting another of his famous tastings. Instagram influencers posed with wine glasses while my cousin worked the room. That's his solution, Ryder spat. Parties and promotions while everything falls apart. My phone buzzed. Kenneth sending an update. The debt purchase was complete. I now own 71% of the estate's notes through my shell company. Mr. Newman, I said carefully, what would you say if new ownership took over? He studied me for a long moment. Depends on the owner. Before I could respond, voices approached. We ducked behind a storage shed as Christian and Aunt Julia walked past. The bank's being unreasonable, Christian was saying. We just need to restructure. Darling, this is serious, Julia cut in. If word gets out about our financial situation, and with the Legacy in Bloom gala next week, it's under control, Aunt Julia. Trust me. They moved out of earshot. Ryder looked at me questioningly. Legacy in Bloom? I asked. Annual charity event. Biggest night of the year. Christians invited half the state's elite. Perfect timing. I pulled out my phone and dialed Kenneth. It's time, I said when he answered. Get everything ready for next week. The documentation is solid, Kenneth replied. But Claire, there's more about your mother. The medical examiner's initial report. Save it for the reveal, I interrupted. And Kenneth, make sure we have cameras. After hanging up, I turned to Ryder. Would you be interested in staying on under new management? Someone who actually cares about this land? He crossed his arms. You're not really from the bank, are you? I smiled. Let's just say I have a vested interest in seeing this place restored to its former glory. Later that evening, I sat in my hotel room reviewing the files Kenneth had sent. Property deeds, bank statements, and most importantly, proof of the forged documents surrounding my mother's death. A knock at my door made me freeze. I wasn't expecting anyone. Claire. Willow's voice came through softly. I know you're in there, please. I opened the door. My cousin stood there looking nervous. How did you... Ryder told me, she said quickly. I've been helping him document everything Christian's been doing. The missing funds, the forged invoices are us. Why? Willow pulled out a small USB drive. Because of this. Mom doesn't know I have it, but it's recordings. Your mother made them in those last weeks. She knew something was wrong, tried to leave evidence. My hands shook as I took the drive. Why are you giving me this? Because what they did to you, to your mother, it wasn't right. Willow glanced over her shoulder. I should go. They can't know I was here. After she left, I plugged in the drive. My mother's voice filled the room, weak but determined. They're making me sign things I don't understand whining for Christian. Vincent says it's for the best, but something's wrong. If anything happens to me, Claire needs to know. The recording cut off. I sat in the darkness, letting years of suspicion crystallize into certainty. My phone lit up with an email. The official invitation to Legacy in Bloom had arrived, addressed to Ms. Rivers, potential investor. I opened my laptop and began typing. Dear Mr. Patterson, as legal representative of River Valley Holdings, I am writing to inform you of our acquisition of the Richards Estate debt notes from Pacific Trust Bank. Per Section 7.2 of the loan agreement, we are exercising our right to immediate inspection of all financial records. I attached the documentation Kenneth had prepared, then added, additionally, we will be attending the Legacy in Bloom event to discuss the estate's future. Send. I pulled out my mother's locket, the one thing I'd managed to take before they cleaned out her room. Inside was a tiny photo of us in the vineyard, her smile bright and real. If I'm burning this down, I whispered to her image, I want every spark caught on film. The response from Patterson arrived almost immediately. Welcome to Legacy in Bloom, Ms. Rivers. We look forward to your attendance. I smiled. They had no idea what was coming. Legacy in Bloom transformed the vineyard into a glittering fantasy. String lights twinkled through the vines, and white-clothed tables dotted the lawn. I adjusted my dark wig and glasses, my Ms. Rivers disguise, and moved through the crowd like a ghost. Welcome, Christian's voice boomed from a small stage. Tonight, we celebrate not just our heritage, but our future. I'm excited to announce our new sustainable wine initiative. I tuned out his practice speech, scanning the gathering. Julia held court near the champagne fountain, while Willow hovered nervously by the appetizer table. The documentary crew I'd hired was capturing everything, just as planned. Ms. Rivers, a waiter approached. Mr. Newman would like to speak with you in the wine cellar. I followed him through the party, past groups of wealthy investors nodding along to Christian's promises of innovation and growth. If they only knew the books were bleeding red. Ryder waited in the cellar, surrounded by oak barrels and history. They're selling futures on wines we haven't even grown, he said without preamble. Taking deposits for vintages that don't exist. How much? Nearly $1 million in pre-sales. Christian's desperate. A noise made us both turn. Willow stood in the doorway, pale but determined. I thought I'd find you here, she said. We need to talk. Now. Ryder nodded and left us alone. Willow's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone. I found more recordings, she whispered. Mum didn't just keep your mother's audio diaries. She kept security footage from that last week. The cellar suddenly felt colder. Show me. The video was grainy but clear enough. My mother in the library arguing with Vincent and Christian, her hands gesturing wildly, tears on her face. I won't let you do this, Mum's voice cracked through the speaker. Claire deserves her inheritance. You can't just... Sarah, be reasonable, Vincent cut in. Christian knows how to run this business. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. I'm going to... Christian stepped forward, his voice soft but menacing. You're going to what? Tell Claire? Who would believe you over us, over the documentation we have? The video ended. Willow's hands shook as she put away her phone. There's more, she said. Security footage from the night it happened, but it's encrypted. I haven't been able to access it. I know someone who can, I replied, thinking of Kenneth's tech contacts. Willow, why are you helping me? She looked away. Because I was there. Not in the room, but in the house. I heard things, saw things. I was 17 and too scared to speak up. But now... Music drifted down from the party above. Christian's voice carried through the stone walls, still spinning his tales of success. Did they kill her? I asked, the question I'd held back for years finally escaping. I don't know for sure, but that night, after it happened, I overheard Christian tell Mom that everything went according to plan. My phone buzzed. A text from Kenneth. Documents ready. Say when. There's something else, Willow continued. The new Sustainable Wine Initiative. It's a scam. They're using it to hide money transfers. I found the offshore accounts. How did you... I'm not just the quiet little sister anymore. I got my MBA. I know how to read between the lines. Footsteps on the cellar stairs made us both freeze. Julia's voice floated down. Christian, are you down here? The investors are asking questions. Willow pushed me behind a rack of bottles. Go. Use what I gave you. Make them pay. I slipped out through the back entrance as Julia descended the stairs. Outside, the party continued in full swing. Christian had moved from the stage to work the crowd, champagne in hand. I found a quiet corner and called Kenneth. How fast can you decrypt a security video? Depends. How old? 12 years, from the estate system. Give me 24 hours. And Claire, the bank's former loan officer, finally talked. You need to hear this. Tell me. Your father and Christian took out additional loans against the estate. Used your mother's forged signature as co-guarantor. That's why they needed those documents changed before they killed her, I finished, watching Christian laugh with his investors. We can prove the forgery, Kenneth said. But the murder, that's harder. Just get me that video. I ended the call and looked up at the house, my mother's house, my house. The documentary crew was filming Christian's speech about family values and tradition. Soon they'd be filming something very different. I touched the locket hidden under my dress. Almost time, Mom. Almost time. Above me, the estate's windows blazed with light like eyes watching, waiting. In 1 week, those lights would shine on a very different kind of legacy. One written in truth instead of lies. Kenneth's office buzzed with activity as we prepared for what he called D-Day. The decrypted security footage played on his laptop, the final piece of evidence we needed. "Watch this part again," he said, rewinding the video. "Your mother enters the study at 9:47 p.m. Christian and Vincent follow 2 minutes later." The grainy footage showed my mother clutching papers to her chest, backing away as they approached. There was no audio, but her fear was clear. "Fast forward," I said, "to when she..." Kenneth skipped ahead. 11:23 p.m. She leaves the study. Look at her walk. She's disoriented. Drugged, maybe. And 20 minutes later, they found her at the bottom of the stairs. "Accidental fall due to dizzy spell," Kenneth quoted from the medical report. "Convenient." My phone lit up with a text from Ryder. "Christian announcing Big Vineyard rebranding tomorrow. Full press coverage. You need to see this email." The forwarded email made my blood boil. Christian planned to rename the estate, erasing the last trace of my family's name. "Perfect timing," I said. "Kenneth, is everything ready?" He gestured to the stack of legal documents on his desk. "Ownership transfer papers, proof of debt acquisition, evidence of financial fraud, and the forged signatures. Plus," he held up a USB drive, "your mother's full story ready for the press." "The documentary crew?" "We'll be there under the pretense of covering the rebranding. They know to focus on you when you make your entrance." A knock interrupted us. Willow slipped in, looking nervous. "Christian's losing it," she said. "He's been shredding documents all morning. I managed to save these." She dropped a folder on the desk. "Bank statements. He's been embezzling from the Vineyard accounts for years." Kenneth whistled as he reviewed the papers. "This is better than we hoped. Clear paper trail." "There's more," Willow continued. "I found Mom's diary. She wrote about that night, about what they did to your mother. She was there." My hands clenched. "Julia helped them." "She brought the wine. The drugged wine." Willow's voice cracked. "I'm so sorry, Claire. I should have told you years ago." I stood, walking to the window. "You're telling me now. That's what matters." My phone buzzed again. An email from the Vineyard's PR team inviting Ms. Rivers to speak at tomorrow's event about potential investment opportunities. "They're really making this easy for us," Kenneth said, reading over my shoulder. "Too easy," I replied. "Willow, does Christian suspect anything?" She shook her head. "He's too focused on impressing the investors, but Julia, she's been asking questions about the bank transfer. Let her ask." I turned to Kenneth. "Is the injunction ready?" He patted a sealed envelope. "Signed by Judge Morrison this morning. The moment you reveal yourself as the true owner, this freezes all their assets." The next hour was a blur of preparation. Kenneth rehearsed the legal proceedings while his team finalised press packets. Willow provided final details about the event layout. "The stage will be here," she indicated on a map. "Christian plans to unveil the new brand name at exactly noon. That's when I'll take the microphone," I said. "Kenneth, you'll be..." "Stage left with the documentation. The cameras will have clear sight lines." "And the police?" "Detective Martinez is ready. She'll move in once you present the evidence of financial fraud." Willow touched my arm. "Claire, what about Mom? What happens to her?" I met her eyes. "That depends on her. If she confesses, tells the truth about that night..." "She won't," Willow whispered. "She's too proud." "Then she goes down with them." As evening fell, I drove to the vineyard one last time as Ms. Rivers. Ryder met me by the old wine cellar. "Everything's set," he said. "The staff knows to let you through security tomorrow, and Claire..." He hesitated. "Whatever happens, the land is behind you. We all are." I walked the rows of vines, touching the rough bark, remembering my mother's lessons about patience and timing. Tomorrow, these vines would have a new story to tell. Back at my hotel, I laid out my outfit for the confrontation. Not a disguise this time, but a sharp black suit that meant business. The locket rested on top, ready to be worn openly at last. My phone lit up with a final text from Kenneth. "All systems go. Make sure the cameras don't blink when you take what's yours." I touched the locket, opened it to see my mother's smile. "Tomorrow," I whispered. "Tomorrow they'll remember your name." The night stretched ahead, my last night of waiting. By this time tomorrow everything would change. Let them prepare their speeches and champagne. Let them gather their press and their pride. I had gathered something stronger, the truth. And finally, it was time to let it bloom. The rebranding ceremony was in full swing when I arrived. Camera crews positioned themselves around a makeshift stage, while investors mingled over morning mimosas. Christian stood at the podium, practicing his smile. "Ms. Rivers," he waved me over. "So glad you could make it. I trust you've reviewed our investment proposal." "Very thoroughly," I replied, touching my mother's locket, now worn proudly outside my suit. His eyes flickered to the jewellery, a slight frown crossing his face. Before he could speak, Julia appeared. "Darling, the press wants preliminary photos." She barely glanced at me. "Ms. Rivers, do find a seat. The announcement begins in 10 minutes. I spotted Kenneth near the stage, briefcase ready. Willow stood with the family, her face pale but determined. Ryder positioned himself by the video team, giving me a subtle nod. "Ladies and gentlemen," Christian began, tapping the microphone, "welcome to a historic day. For generations, this land has been known as Richard's Estate. Today, we embrace the future with a new name, a new vision." I moved closer to the stage, Kenneth falling into step beside me. "Ready?" he whispered. "Born ready," Christian continued, his voice swelling with practiced emotion. "And so, it gives me great pleasure to announce our new identity, Golden Valley Vintners, where tradition meets innovation." "Actually," I cut in, stepping onto the stage, "there's been a slight change of plans," the crowd murmured. Christian's smile froze. "Ms. Rivers, this isn't the time—" "My name isn't Rivers." I removed my wig, letting my natural hair fall free. "It's Claire Richards, and this vineyard, it belongs to me." The audience gasped. Julia stood up sharply, knocking over her champagne flute. "Security!" Christian called, but Ryder was already moving, positioning himself between the guards and the stage. "Kenneth," I said calmly, "the papers, please." My lawyer stepped forward, opening his briefcase. "As of last month, Ms. Richards holds controlling interest in all estate debt notes through legal purchase from Pacific Trust Bank. Additionally—" "This is absurd," Christian sputtered. "You have no right." "I have every right." I turned to the documentary crew. "Are you getting this? Good. Because here's where it gets interesting." I pulled out my phone, connecting it to the sound system. My mother's voice filled the air. "They're making me sign everything over. The medication makes it hard to think. Christian says it's for my own good, but I know what they're doing." Julia lunged for the sound controls, but Willow blocked her path. "That's enough," Christian shouted. "This is clearly a fabrication, like the fabricated documents you used to steal my inheritance." I nodded to Kenneth, who projected financial records onto the screen behind us. "Or maybe like these bank statements showing systematic embezzlement." The crowd was dead silent now, with cameras rolling. "And let's not forget the most interesting fabrication," I continued, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "The accident report from the night my mother died. Detective Martinez emerged from the crowd, flanked by officers. Speaking of that night," the detective said, "we've reopened the investigation based on new evidence." Christian's composure cracked. "Aunt Julia, do something." But Julia was backing away, her face ashen. I never meant—" "Never meant what, Mom?" Willow stepped forward. "Never meant to help them drug her? Never meant to watch her die?" The detective moved toward Julia. "Mom, we'd like you to come with us." Chaos erupted. Investors fled as officers moved in. Christian tried to run but was quickly detained. Julia collapsed into a chair, sobbing, as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. I walked to Christian as they led him away. "The property transfers to my control immediately. You have 24 hours to vacate." "You think this makes you win?" he snarled. "You're still alone, still the outsider. No one here will ever accept you." "She's not alone," Ryder called out, and the vineyard workers gathered behind him nodded. "This land knows its true owner." The documentary crew captured everything. The arrests, the evidence, the shocked faces of the social elite witnessing the fall of their perfect hosts. Later, as the police cars pulled away and the crowd dispersed, I stood in my father's study, my study now. Willow appeared in the doorway. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "Now?" I picked up a photo of my mother from the desk. "Now we rebuild. The right way. We. If you want to stay, there's a place for you here. For anyone who wants to be part of an honest legacy." She smiled through tears. "I'd like that." I looked out over the vineyard where Ryder was already organising the workers for the afternoon shift. The vines stretched endlessly toward the horizon, waiting for a new season of growth. My phone buzzed. Kenneth confirming the property transfer was complete. Everything was mine now. Everything they'd tried to take. But standing there, watching the sun set over my mother's beloved vines, victory felt different than I'd imagined. It felt like a beginning. The media circus lasted weeks. Every morning brought new reporters to the estate gates, hungry for details about the family scandal. I let Kenneth handle most of the interviews while I focused on salvaging what remained of the harvest season. The workers need new equipment, Ryder said, as we walked the rows of vines. Christian let everything deteriorate. Make a list, I replied. Whatever we need, we'll get it. A golf cart approached, carrying Willow and Detective Martinez. We found something, Willow called out, waving a leather-bound book. In the old wine cellar. The detective held up an evidence bag. Your mother's original diary, the complete version. We gathered in the study, my mother's favourite room. Martinez spread the diary pages across the desk while Kenneth took notes. She documented everything, Martinez explained. The threats, the forged documents, even recorded conversations on her phone. She knew they were planning something. But why didn't she run? I asked, touching one of the pages. Why stay? Willow pointed to an entry. Read this. My mother's handwriting was shaky but clear. They threatened Claire's future if I don't cooperate. Vincent says he'll make sure she never sees a penny of her inheritance, never gets near the vineyard again. I have to protect her legacy. I have to find a way. There's more, Martinez said quietly. We found the wine bottle, the one from that night. It still had traces of the sedative they used. Kenneth looked up from his notes. This strengthens the prosecution's case significantly. A knock interrupted us. One of the security guards entered. Ms. Richards, Julia's here. She's asking to speak with you. My aunt sat in her car outside, looking smaller than I remembered. Her designer clothes were replaced by simple slacks and a sweater. Hello, Claire, she said as I approached. I've come to confess. I got into the passenger seat. The car smelled of her familiar perfume, bringing back memories of childhood holidays and family dinners. I'm listening. That night, she began, her hands tight on the steering wheel, your mother discovered Christian had been embezzling money. She threatened to expose everything. Vincent, he ordered me to handle it. By poisoning her? It was supposed to be just enough to keep her quiet, confused. But the dose... Julia's voice cracked. Christian gave her too much. When she fell, we could have called for help. We should have. But you didn't. No, we didn't. She turned to face me. I'm telling the prosecutor everything. About the forged documents, the threats, all of it. I know it doesn't make up for what we did. No, I said, opening the car door. It doesn't. Back inside, Ryder waited with urgent news. The wine critics are here, he said. They want to know if we're still entering the competition next month. I hadn't even thought about the prestigious annual wine competition, something my mother had always valued highly. What do we have ready? Your mother's special reserve, the last batch she personally oversaw. It's been aging perfectly. I followed him to the cellar where the bottles lay waiting, dusty with time but pristine. She called it Truth's Harvest, Ryder said, handling a bottle reverently, said some wines need time to reveal their full character. Just like revenge, I thought. That evening, I sat alone in the study, surrounded by the day's revelations. My phone buzzed with a text from Kenneth. Christian's taking a plea deal, 15 years minimum. Another message followed from Willow. Mum's testimony is tomorrow. She's telling everything. I opened my laptop, where the documentary footage waited for final editing. The working title glowed on the screen. Inheritance, What They Never Earned. A soft knock made me look up. One of the older vineyard workers, Maria, stood in the doorway. Miss Claire, we found this while cleaning out the old storage room. She held out a dusty photo album. The pictures inside showed my mother in happier days, teaching me about the vines, showing me how to test the soil. In every image, her smile was real, her love for the land evident. She always said you had her touch with the grapes, Maria said softly. That you understood the patience needed to make something beautiful. I touched one of the photos. Did she know about what they were planning? She knew something was coming. That's why she left so many breadcrumbs for you to follow. She believed you'd find your way back here. Standing at the window, I watched the sunset paint the vineyard gold. Workers were finishing their day. calling out friendly good nights. Ryder and Willow discussed plans for tomorrow's harvest. The land felt alive again, healing. I picked up my mother's portrait from the desk. This time, I whispered. They didn't silence us. The victory felt complete, but different than I'd imagined. Not just revenge served cold, but truth finally seeing daylight. Justice finally taking root. Like the best wines, some victories need time to reveal their true nature. And this one was just beginning to bloom. The screening room fell silent as the documentary ended. My mother's face froze on the screen, her last recorded words hanging in the air. Claire will know what to do with the truth when she finds it. Kenneth switched on the lights. Well, what do you think? I looked at the small gathering. Willow, Ryder, Maria, and the core vineyard team. It's perfect. Release it. The timing's good, Willow said. The competition judges arrive tomorrow. This will add weight to our story. My phone buzzed. A text from Detective Martinez. Julia's testimony finished. Christian's sentence confirmed. 18 years. Ryder cleared his throat. Speaking of tomorrow, there's something you should see. He led us to the wine cellar, where rows of bottles gleamed in the dim light. But he walked past them to a hidden corner, pulling out a dusty bottle with a handwritten label. Found this behind a false panel, he said. Your mother's secret batch. The one she made the summer before. I took the bottle, reading the label in her familiar script. For Claire, when the truth blooms. There's more, Maria added, producing an envelope. This was with it. My hands trembled as I opened the letter. My dearest Claire, if you're reading this, you've found your way home. I knew you would. This wine is special, made from the sweetest grapes of that last summer when you helped me tend the vines. I added something unique. Night-blooming jasmine, your favourite. They said it couldn't be done, that the flower would overwhelm the grape, but like you, it found its perfect balance. They think they can erase us, silence us, bury the truth under papers and lies. But truth, like wine, has its own time, its own way of surfacing. I'm sorry I couldn't fight them harder. Sorry I couldn't protect you from what was coming, but I left you clues, breadcrumbs, hoping your brilliant mind would piece it together. This bottle isn't just wine, it's our story. Share it when you're ready. Let them taste what they tried to destroy. All my love, Mom. Willow touched my shoulder. We should serve this tomorrow. Let the judges taste it. Not just the judges, I said. Everyone. This story belongs to all of us now. The next morning, the estate buzzed with activity. Critics and judges arrived, notebooks ready. Camera crews set up for the documentary's premiere screening. Even some of our harshest industry competitors came, curious about the vineyard that had survived scandal. I stood on the same stage where I'd exposed Christian, but this time to tell a different story. Welcome to Truth's Harvest, I began. Today isn't just about wine, it's about legacy. Real legacy, built on honest soil. The documentary played on outdoor screens while servers circulated with my mother's special vintage. I watched faces change as they sipped. Surprise, then pleasure, then something deeper. This is extraordinary, one judge whispered. The complexity. How did you achieve this balance? My mother's recipe, I said. She knew some flowers only bloom in darkness. Ryder appeared with news. We just got word. We won. Best vintage, best innovation, and, he grinned, best new direction. The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. But I was watching the workers, their proud smiles, their knowing nods. They understood what this really meant. Later, as the celebration continued, I found a quiet moment in the study. The documentary played on my laptop, cycling through family photos, evidence files, confession recordings. The truth, finally uncorked. Willow entered, carrying 2 glasses of our winning wine. To your mother, she said, offering one to me. To truth, I replied, however long it takes to bloom. We sipped in comfortable silence until Ryder knocked. Sorry to interrupt, but there's something you need to see. He led us to the vineyard's highest point, where workers had gathered. As the sun set, they raised their glasses, not in celebration, but in quiet remembrance. Maria stepped forward. We planted something special. Look. Between the vines, night-blooming jasmine had taken root, its white flowers opening to the evening air, the same flowers my mother had used in her final vintage. The flowers will protect the grapes, Maria explained. Like your mother protected you. Every harvest will carry her touch now. I touched a jasmine blossom, its perfume mixing with the vineyard's earthier scents. Perfect balance, just like she'd said. My phone lit up. The documentary had gone live. Comments and shares were already flooding in. The truth was spreading, flowing like wine. But standing there, watching darkness fall over my mother's beloved vines, I realised something. Revenge might have brought me home, but it wasn't what would keep me here. That would be the work. The honest, patient work of growing something real, something true. I raised my glass to the stars emerging above us. To next season's harvest. The workers raised theirs in return, their voices joining mine. To next season's harvest. In the distance, jasmine bloomed in the darkness, adding its secret sweetness to the night air.
The first thing I noticed when I pulled into my driveway was the pile of black garbage bags scattered across our manicured lawn. The second thing was my mother's pearl-white Mercedes missing from its usual spot. My hands trembled as I shifted my beat-up Honda into park. I'm Zara, and this was supposed to be my surprise visit home from college for spring break. Instead, it felt like walking into a nightmare. The neighbor's curtains twitched as I stepped out of my car. 3 years of college had taught me to keep my composure, but nothing prepared me for seeing my entire life stuffed into contractor-grade trash bags, getting soaked by the sprinklers. A white envelope was taped to the front door. My name was written in my mother's perfect cursive. The same handwriting that used to leave encouraging notes in my lunchbox now spelled out my exile. You're not welcome here anymore. The locks have been changed. This is what's best for the family name. The paper crumpled in my fist. I pulled out my phone, dialing my mother's number. Straight to voicemail. Of course. Hey there, sweetheart. Mrs. Peterson, our elderly neighbor, called from across the fence. I've been keeping an eye on your things since this morning. Your mother and Tinsley left about an hour ago. Tinsley, my cousin. Everything suddenly made sense. Did they say anything? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Mrs. Peterson wrung her hands. Only that there had been some kind of family arrangement. They sold the house, dear. To someone in the family, I think. For $1, if you can believe it. To protect the family assets is what your cousin said. $1. They sold my childhood home, my grandfather's house, for $1. I was gathering my bags when a sleek black BMW pulled up. Tinsley emerged, designer sunglasses perched on her nose, looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine cover. Oh, Zara, what a surprise, she said, voice dripping with false sweetness. I thought you were staying at school this break. Didn't your mother tell you about the new arrangements? What arrangements, Tinsley? The ones where you convinced her to sell our house for pocket change? She laughed, the sound like breaking glass. Don't be dramatic. It's a family matter. We're protecting what's ours. Besides, you're never here anyway. Always off at that scholarship school of yours. This was my grandfather's house, I said, through clenched teeth. Was being the operative word. Tinsley checked her reflection in her phone. The deed's already transferred. Maybe if you'd been around more, you'd know what's best for the family. I watched her sashay to the front door, my front door, and unlock it with a key that probably still had the hardware store shine. Something wasn't adding up. My grandfather had been meticulous about his property, about legacy. He wouldn't have left things this vulnerable. I pulled out my phone again, this time Googling the county recorder's office. My hands shook as I pressed the call button. County recorder's office, how can I help you? Hi, I need information about a property deed. I rattled off our address, my heart pounding. Let me look that up for you. Keys clicked in the background. Yes, I have that right here. Would you like to know who's listed on the deed? I gripped the phone tighter. Yes, please. It looks like there was a recent transfer attempt, but there seems to be some confusion. The original deed from 5 years ago lists 2 names, Elias Ross and Zara Ross. The world stopped spinning for a moment. My grandfather had put my name on the deed. Before he died, he'd made me a legal owner, and nobody knew. Could you repeat that? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You're listed as a co-owner, miss, which means any sale or transfer would require your signature. Do you want me to email you a copy of the deed? A slow smile spread across my face as I watched Tinsley through the front window, arranging flowers in what she thought was her new foyer. Yes, I said. Please send everything you have. My grandfather always told me I was his legacy. Looks like he made sure of it in more ways than one. I got back in my car, leaving the garbage bags where they lay. Let them think they've won. Let them celebrate in my grandfather's house, drinking wine in his study, sleeping in rooms that didn't belong to them. They wanted to play games with property? Fine, but they forgot the first rule of real estate. Always check the deed. I pulled away from the curb, already planning my next move. They thought they could throw me away like trash, but they were about to learn what happens when you underestimate the quiet one in the family. My phone buzzed with an email notification. Deed documentation attached. Game on. You know what your grandfather used to say about that tree? Quinn asked, scrolling through the deed documents on her laptop. We were sitting in her cramped studio apartment, surrounded by takeout containers and legal printouts. Which one? I asked, though I already knew. The big oak in the backyard. He said it was older than the house itself. I smiled, remembering summer afternoons under that oak's sprawling branches. He called it the guardian, said it watched over everything that mattered. My grandfather had been right about so many things. I closed my eyes, and suddenly I was 12 again, following him around the property as he pointed out property markers and explained the importance of boundaries. A legacy isn't just about money, little bird, he'd say, using his special nickname for me. It's about protecting what matters. Some people forget that part. Quinn's voice pulled me back to the present. Zara, look at this. She turned her laptop toward me. The date your grandfather added you to the deed. It was 3 months before he passed away. He never told me, I whispered, because he knew they'd try to talk him out of it. Quinn highlighted a section of text. He did it quietly, legally, with 2 witnesses. Your mother and Tinsley had no idea. I pulled out my phone, opening the Photos app to a picture I'd taken earlier at the county recorder's office. The document was yellowed, but the signatures were clear. My grandfather's steady hand, and next to it, the witnesses, his lawyer and our old gardener. What's your next move? Quinn asked, closing her laptop. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Hi, Zara. This is Savannah Franklin from Meridian Real Estate. Your friend Quinn gave me your number. There's something you should know about the zoning changes behind your property. Can we meet? Quinn peered over my shoulder. Perfect timing. I did some digging. Savannah's legit. She specializes in commercial development. I typed back a quick response, setting up a meeting for tomorrow. My phone buzzed again, this time with a call from my mother. I let it go to voicemail. You should hear this, Quinn said, pulling up a local news website. They're rezoning all the land along the creek. The swampy part behind your house? It's about to become prime real estate. The memory hit me like a thunderbolt. My grandfather walking me through that boggy back acre when I was 15. Everyone thinks this land is worthless, he'd said, pointing to the marshy ground. But worthless is just another word for not yet valuable. Remember that, little bird. I grabbed my keys. I need to see something. 20 minutes later, I parked a block away from my old house. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the property. Through the kitchen window, I could see my mother and Tinsley laughing over wine glasses. But I wasn't interested in the house. I made my way around back, staying close to the neighbor's fence. The old oak tree stood sentinel over the yard, and beyond it, the supposedly worthless swampland stretched into the darkness. My phone lit up with another text from Savannah. Just confirmed. City Council approved the rezoning. That back acre? It's worth more than the house now. A lot more. I smiled in the growing darkness. My grandfather's voice echoed in my head. Some people only see what's right in front of them, little bird, but you've always seen further. Walking back to my car, I passed Mrs. Peterson watering her flowers. "Oh, Zara," she called out. "Did you hear? Your cousin's been talking about putting in a pool where that old swampy bit is. Says she's going to make something of that wasteland." "Is that so?" I kept my voice neutral. "Interesting timing. I told her what your grandfather always said about that land, but she just laughed. Said the old man didn't know what he was sitting on." My phone buzzed again. Quinn had sent a screenshot of a real estate listing. "Prime development opportunity. Newly rezoned commercial parcel." Below it was a message. "Meeting set up with Cody from Perkins Development tomorrow at 2. He's interested." I looked back at the house one last time. Through the window I could see Tinsley gesturing dramatically, probably planning her imaginary pool. My mother nodded along, both of them basking in their dollar store victory. They thought they'd written me out of the family story, but my grandfather had written me into something much bigger. My phone chimed with one final message. The county recorder had finished processing my deed verification request. The property was officially confirmed in my name. Tomorrow I'd meet with Savannah and Cody. Tomorrow I'd start turning my grandfather's foresight into their nightmare. But tonight I stood under the old oak tree one last time, placing my hand on its rough bark. "Watch over this for me," I whispered. "Things are about to change." 8.7 million, Cody said, sliding the proposal across the sleek conference table. "That's our initial offer for the back acre, pending environmental surveys." Savannah, my realtor, kept her poker face, but I caught the slight widening of her eyes. We were sitting in Perkins Development's downtown office, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows and architectural models. "The rezoning makes it perfect for our mixed-use project," Cody continued. "Retail on the ground floor, luxury apartments above. The creek view is a major selling point." I picked up the proposal, thinking of my mother and Tinsley planning their pool party in my backyard. "And the existing house?" "Would need to come down." Cody pulled up a 3D rendering on his tablet. "The development footprint requires the entire parcel." My throat tightened. That house held every memory I had of my grandfather. But then again, my mother and Tinsley had already poisoned those memories. "There's just one potential complication," Savannah interjected. "The current occupants are illegally attempting to transfer property they don't fully own," I finished. "I have the documentation right here." Cody reviewed the deed papers, nodding slowly. "This is actually cleaner than most family situations we deal with. You're the legal owner, Ms. Ross. The $1 transfer they attempted was invalid without your signature." My phone buzzed, a social media notification. Tinsley had just posted photos of their garden soiree. "Creating new memories in our family estate. Blessed Shior legacy." The images showed my mother and Tinsley posing in sundresses beside my grandfather's prized rose bushes. Uncle Bobby stood in the background, raising a champagne glass. "How soon can we move forward, Altin Rao?" I asked, turning my phone face down. "We've already filed preliminary permits," Cody replied. "Standard procedure to lock in the zoning. Your name is on them as the property owner." Savannah raised an eyebrow. "That might cause some waves." "Let it," I said. "When can we close?" 30 days, Cody said. "We'll need environmental studies, but given the rezoning timeline, we want to move quickly." Another buzz from my phone, a text from Quinn. "They're planning some big announcement party next weekend. Tinsley's inviting half the town." Perfect timing. "One condition," I said to Cody. "Nothing goes public until closing. I want all the paperwork ready, but no announcements." He smiled. "Done. Though you should know, construction notices will go out to adjacent properties next week, required by law." "That's fine." I signed the preliminary agreement. They'll find out soon enough. Later that evening, I drove past the house again. Caterers were setting up tables in the backyard, my backyard. String lights twinkled in the old oak tree, and a banner hung across the back porch. "Welcome to the Clayton family estate." My phone rang, Uncle Bobby's number. I let it go to voicemail. "Zara, it's your uncle. Listen, there's some confusion with the city, something about building permits in your name. Call me back immediately. I pulled into Mrs. Peterson's driveway. She was waiting on her porch with 2 glasses of iced tea. Quite the party they're planning, she said, handing me a glass. Your cousin's telling everyone they're going to restore the property to its former glory. Through the gathering darkness, we could see Tinsley directing the catering staff, gesturing toward the swampy back acre like a general planning a conquest. Your grandfather would be rolling in his grave, Mrs. Peterson muttered. He knew what that land was worth. Why do you think he never developed it? He was waiting, I said softly. He told me once, patience is the difference between a good decision and a great one. My phone buzzed again, an email from the city planning department confirming receipt of the development applications. In the attachment was a notice that would go out to all neighboring properties next week. Mrs. Peterson squeezed my hand. You're so much like him, you know. Quiet, observant. He always said you were the only one who really listened. Through the trees, I could hear Tinsley's laugh carrying across the yard. She was probably already planning where to put her pool furniture. Would you do me a favor? I asked Mrs. Peterson. When you get the construction notice next week, could you make sure to mention it at their party? Her eyes twinkled. Oh, honey, I'll do better than that. I'll bring the actual notice with me. I finished my tea and stood up. In exactly 10 days, that party would become a very different kind of celebration. My phone lit up one last time, an email from Cody's legal team with the preliminary contracts attached. The subject line read, Ready for signatures, 8.7 Mallard Development Agreement. I looked back at the house, at my mother directing caterers under the oak tree's branches. They thought they were celebrating a new beginning. They had no idea it was actually the end. The charity fundraiser was in full swing when I walked through the front doors of my childhood home. Quinn had helped me select the perfect outfit, a black cocktail dress that screamed old money, paired with my grandfather's vintage pearl earrings. Zara? Tinsley's voice cut through the crowd. I didn't expect to see you here. I bought a ticket, I said, holding up the invitation. It's for charity, after all. She recovered quickly, plastering on her society smile. Of course, how community-minded of you, though you might have dressed more appropriately for a garden party. I sipped my champagne. I dressed for business, actually. I hear there are some interesting development opportunities in the area. Tinsley's smile flickered. Before she could respond, my mother appeared, looking elegant but strained. Zara, what are you doing here? Supporting local causes, I said. Grandfather always said it was important to invest in the community. Uncle Bobby materialized beside them, his face flushed from too much whiskey. Speaking of investments, we need to talk about those permit applications. Bobby, my mother cut him off sharply. Not now. I watched Mrs. Peterson circulating through the crowd, the construction notice tucked carefully in her purse. Right on cue, she approached our group. Oh, have you all seen this fascinating document? She pulled out the notice. Something about major development plans for the back acre. How exciting! The color drained from Tinsley's face as she snatched the paper. Her eyes scanned the document, stopping at my name listed as the property owner. This must be a mistake, she said, her voice tight. No mistake, I replied. Just good planning. Grandfather taught me all about that. My mother grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in. Kitchen, now. She practically dragged me through the crowd of mingling guests, past the caterers, and into the kitchen where I'd once helped my grandfather bake cookies. The slap caught me off guard, stinging across my cheek. How dare you, she hissed, coming here trying to ruin everything we've built. Built? I laughed. You mean what you stole? For $1? We did what was necessary to protect this house from your reckless decisions. My reckless decisions? Like going to college? Like not letting Tinsley control every aspect of my life? She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. You have no right to this property. We made sure of that. I opened my clutch slowly, deliberately. The copy of the original deed felt heavy in my hands. Actually, Mother, Grandfather made sure of something else. She stared at the document, at the two names listed as legal owners. Her hands began to shake. "That's not possible," she whispered. "He wouldn't—" "Wouldn't what? Protect his legacy? Trust me more than you?" The kitchen door swung open. Tinsley stood there, holding the construction notice like it was contaminated. "Aunt Daphne, we have a serious problem. The development company already has all the permits," I finished. "Funny how things work out when you actually own the property." Tinsley's face contorted. "You little—" "Careful!" I cut her off. "There are donors right outside. Wouldn't want to make a scene." Through the kitchen window, I could see Uncle Bobby arguing with Mrs. Peterson, his face getting redder by the second. Guests were starting to stare. "Whatever you're planning," my mother said, "stop it now. Think about the family name." I straightened my grandfather's pearls. "I am thinking about it. I'm thinking about how you threw my belongings onto the lawn in garbage bags. I'm thinking about how you celebrated stealing my inheritance. We didn't steal. Save it." I headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and you might want to hold off on those pool plans, Tinsley. The bulldozers will need that space." I walked back into the party, head high, letting the kitchen door swing shut on their stunned faces. Quinn was waiting by the bar, trying not to smile. "How'd it go?" "Better than expected." I grabbed another champagne flute. "Mrs. Peterson, you have impeccable timing." The elderly woman winked. "Your grandfather would be proud, dear. He always said you had steel in your spine." My phone buzzed, a text from Cody. "Final contracts ready. Closing date set." Through the French doors, I could see my mother and Tinsley huddled with Uncle Bobby, their faces pale as they examined the deed copy I'd left behind. "Should we stay for the donor speeches?" Quinn asked. "No need." I set down my glass. I think my point's been made. As we walked out, I heard Tinsley's voice rise in panic. "What do you mean we can't stop her?" The oak tree cast long shadows across the lawn in the setting sun. Soon it would be gone, along with everything else they thought they'd stolen from me. My phone buzzed again, the closing date and time now officially scheduled. Let them panic, let them scheme. In exactly 1 week, they'd learn what it felt like to lose everything, and I'd be there to watch. "Sign here and here," Cody said, sliding the thick contract across the conference table. "Initial each page." My hand was steady as I signed away my childhood home. Quinn sat beside me, reviewing each document with her pre-law precision. Savannah stood by the window, watching the city skyline. $8.7 million, Savannah said, almost reverently. "Your grandfather would be impressed." The last week had been a storm of legal threats and desperate phone calls. Uncle Bobby had tried everything: lawyers, private investigators, even attempting to challenge my grandfather's mental state when he added me to the deed. Nothing stuck. "One last signature," Cody said, "and we're done." My phone buzzed, a voicemail from my mother. "Zara, please, we can talk about this. Whatever you want, money, apologies, anything. Just don't destroy your grandfather's legacy." Delete. I signed the final page. "Congratulations," Cody said, gathering the papers. "Construction starts Monday." Outside the law office, Quinn squeezed my arm. "You okay? I should feel something, right?" I watched the traffic below. Guilt, maybe? Sadness? "They threw your things in garbage bags," Quinn reminded me. "They tried to erase you." My phone rang again. Tinsley this time. I answered on speaker. "You vindictive little snake," she hissed. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Sold my property for market value? Unlike some people, I didn't settle for $1. "My engagement party is next month. We were going to host it in the garden," I laughed. "Better find a new venue. The bulldozers won't make great party decorations." "Your mother is devastated," Tinsley spat. "She hasn't stopped crying." "Funny, I didn't hear her crying when she changed the locks on me." Quinn gestured to her watch. We had another meeting with the developers in 20 minutes. Goodbye, Tinsley. Good luck with the wedding. I hear the community center has a lovely event space. I hung up as she was mid-screech. That felt good, Quinn admitted. We were heading to the elevator when Mrs. Peterson called. Zara, dear, you need to come see this. They're having some kind of meltdown on the front lawn. I could hear shouting in the background. What's happening? Your uncle's here with some lawyer, waving papers around. Your mother's crying on the porch steps. And Tinsley, well, she's not taking it well. Quinn and I exchanged looks. We'll be right there. 15 minutes later, we parked down the street. The scene was exactly as Mrs. Peterson described. Uncle Bobby red-faced and yelling, my mother crumpled on the steps, and Tinsley pacing the lawn in her designer heels. You can't do this, Uncle Bobby shouted when he saw me. This house has been in our family for generations. Exactly, I said calmly. And Grandfather made sure it stayed with family he trusted. Trust? My mother stood, mascara streaking her cheeks. You're destroying everything he built. No, Mother, I'm destroying what you tried to steal. There's a difference. Tinsley stormed over, jabbing her finger at my chest. My father has investors lined up. We were going to develop this property ourselves. I smiled. With what legal right? You're not on the deed, remember? We're family, my mother pleaded. Family? I pulled out my phone, showing them the photo I'd saved, my belongings scattered across the lawn in garbage bags. Is this how family treats each other? Uncle Bobby's lawyer cleared his throat. Ms. Ross, perhaps we could discuss a reasonable settlement. The reasonable time for discussion was before they tried to steal my inheritance. Now we're past discussing. My phone buzzed, Cody confirming the construction schedule. I turned to leave, then stopped. Oh, and you have exactly 72 hours to vacate the property. The demolition crew needs a clear workspace. You can't be serious, Tinsley gasped. Check the contracts you tried to forge. The house and land are sold. Your illegal occupancy ends Monday. Mrs. Peterson appeared on her porch with a glass of lemonade, settling in to watch the show. Where are we supposed to go? My mother asked, her voice small. Not my problem. I headed back to my car. But I hear the extended stay has weekly rates. Quinn was trying not to laugh as we drove away. In the rearview mirror, I could see Uncle Bobby throwing his useless legal papers on the ground, Tinsley screaming into her phone, and my mother still standing on the steps of a house that was no longer hers. My phone lit up with a final text from Cody. Demolition permit approved, Monday 8 a.m. sharp. I thought I'd feel emptier, watching my childhood home slip away. Instead, I felt lighter, cleaner, free. Want to get coffee? Quinn asked. Actually, I said, I need to visit Grandfather's grave. Tell him it's done. The sun was setting as we pulled away, casting long shadows across the lawn where my belongings had once been thrown away like trash. Soon, everything would be different. And that was exactly the point. Monday morning dawned clear and crisp. I parked across the street at 7:45 a.m., watching the house through my windshield. Quinn handed me a coffee from the cup holder. They're still in there, she said, nodding toward the Mercedes and BMW in the driveway. Think they believe you were bluffing? They always did underestimate me. Right on schedule, 3 massive yellow bulldozers rumbled down the street, followed by Cody's black SUV. The construction crew began setting up barriers and caution tape while my family watched in horror from the kitchen window. My phone rang. Uncle Bobby, the police are on their way, he threatened. This is illegal forced eviction. Check your email, I replied calmly. The eviction notice was served 10 days ago. You chose to ignore it. The front door burst open. Tinsley stormed out in silk pajamas, waving her arms at the construction crew. Stop! You can't do this. We live here. Cody stepped forward, hard hat in hand. Ma'am, this is private property under development contract. I have all the permits right here. This is our house, she screamed. Not according to the deed and sale documents, Cody replied, maddeningly professional. Now, for safety reasons, I need you to clear the construction zone. My mother appeared on the porch, still in her robe. Please, she begged the crew, just give us more time. The first bulldozer revved its engine. The sound of china rattling inside the house carried across the lawn. I stepped out of my car, heels clicking on the pavement as I approached. Tinsley spun toward me, face contorted with rage. You evil little... Careful, I cut her off. The neighbors are watching. Indeed, every house on the street had spectators on their porches. Mrs. Peterson was serving coffee to her book club, all of them gathered for the show. Zara, my mother pleaded, this house, these memories... I reached into my purse and pulled out a check. Here's your $1 back. That's what you sold it for, right? The bulldozer inched forward. The china rattled louder. Uncle Bobby's Mercedes screeched into the driveway, him and his lawyer jumping out. We have an injunction, the lawyer shouted, waving papers. Cody didn't even blink. No, you have an injunction request that was denied last night. Would you like to see the judge's response? The bulldozer's blade touched the garden wall. My mother screamed. Our things are still inside, Tinsley wailed. You had 10 days, I reminded her. The same courtesy you gave me with those garbage bags. The wall crumbled. Inside, a crystal vase crashed to the floor. 5 minutes, Cody announced. Grab what you can carry and clear the zone. After that, we're proceeding as planned. They ran inside in a panic, emerging with armfuls of clothes, jewelry boxes, and photo albums. My mother clutched her prized crystal collection. Tinsley struggled with designer handbags. Your grandfather would hate you for this, Uncle Bobby spat as he carried out his golf clubs. No, I said quietly. He prepared me for this. There's a difference. The bulldozer pushed forward again. The kitchen windows rattled in their frames. Time's up, Cody called out. Clear the zone. My mother stumbled down the steps one last time, mascara streaming down her face. Zara, please, where are we supposed to go? I looked at the garbage bags they'd stuffed with their belongings, so similar to the ones they'd filled with mine. Not my problem, I echoed her words from months ago, but I hear the extended stay has weekly rates. The first bulldozer slammed into the front wall. The sound of splintering wood filled the air. Tinsley screamed, dropping her armful of shoes. My mother sank to her knees on the lawn. All our memories. Should have thought about that before you threw away mine. The roof began to cave. The old oak tree watched silently as decades of family history crumbled into dust. Quinn appeared at my side, holding out an envelope. Perfect timing. I handed the envelope to my mother. Inside was a single photo. Me and my grandfather on the porch steps, his arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling. He knew, I said softly. He knew you'd choose wrong. That's why he chose for you. The house groaned, walls buckling. Uncle Bobby's lawyer was already walking away, shaking his head. Tinsley sat in her BMW, sobbing into her steering wheel. My phone buzzed. A text from Cody. Development plans finalized. Groundbreaking ceremony next week? I watched as the bulldozer took down the last standing wall. Through the dust and debris, I could see straight through to the back acre, the land everyone had dismissed as worthless. Let's go, Quinn said. The demo crew can handle the rest. I took one last look at my mother, still kneeling on the grass, clutching that photo like a lifeline. Goodbye, Mother, I said. Thanks for teaching me exactly what not to do with a legacy. The old oak tree cast its shadow over the ruins as we drove away. Some lessons, it seemed, were worth $8.7 million to teach. The local news vans arrived 3 days after the demolition. I watched the coverage from Quinn's apartment, sipping coffee as the reporter stood in front of the rubble. A family dispute turned property war has left one of the city's oldest homes in ruins, Charine, the reporter said. Sources say the multi-million-dollar development deal has caused irreparable rifts. Quinn muted the TV. Have you seen Tinsley's social media meltdown? I pulled up Instagram. Tinsley had posted a tear-streaked selfie. Betrayed by blood. My wedding venue destroyed. Sometimes family hurts you the most. Heartbroken, Char toxic family. The comments were brutal. Her fiancé's family had apparently seen the news coverage. Her engagement's off, Quinn said, scrolling through her phone. His family pulled out after the story broke. Something about concerning family dynamics. My phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Ross, this is Margaret from Evergreen Cemetery. We found something unusual during our grounds maintenance. A safety deposit box key was left at your grandfather's grave. Quinn and I exchanged looks. 30 minutes later, we stood in front of his headstone. The morning dew still clung to the grass, and someone had left fresh flowers, not my mother's usual roses. Mrs. Peterson, Quinn guessed, nodding at the wildflowers. She said she visits him sometimes. The groundskeeper handed me the key. It was attached to a familiar leather fob, my grandfather's initials worn soft with age. The box is at First National, I said, recognizing the key type. He used to take me there when I was little. The bank manager recognized me immediately. Your grandfather was very specific about this box, she said, leading us to the vault. It was only to be accessed after certain property transactions were completed. She left us alone with the box. Inside was a leather-bound journal and an envelope with my name on it. Read it, Quinn whispered. The letter was in my grandfather's steady handwriting. My little bird, if you're reading this, then everything has happened as I feared it might. Your mother and cousin always valued appearance over substance, control over growth. I watched them try to clip your wings for years. The journal contains everything, property deeds, account numbers, and most importantly, the truth about our family's legacy. You were never the quiet one they dismissed. You were the watchful one, the patient one. I'm sorry for the pain they caused you, but I'm not sorry for trusting you with everything I built. The last entry is for you alone. Love, Grandfather. Quinn squeezed my hand as I opened the journal to the final page. Zara protects. Zara preserves. She always finds the way. Below was a list of accounts, properties, and investments I never knew existed. The house had just been the beginning. My phone buzzed. Uncle Bobby again. The development deal was just the start, he threatened. We're contesting everything, every account, every property. No, I cut him off. You're not. Check your email. I'd had Quinn forward the journal's contents to our lawyer an hour ago. The documentation was airtight. You've lost everything, I said quietly. Just like you tried to make me lose everything? I hung up as he started shouting. Walking out of the bank, we passed a coffee shop with the morning news playing. Tinsley was on screen, trying to shield her face from cameras as she moved out of her luxury apartment, apparently funded by family money she no longer had access to. Was it worth it? Quinn asked as we drove back to the cemetery. Watching it all fall apart? I thought about the garbage bags in the rain, the locked doors, the champagne parties on stolen property. They thought they were writing me out of the story, I said. They didn't realize they were just finishing a chapter Grandfather started long ago. We parked near his grave. The wildflowers Mrs. Peterson left were dancing in the breeze. My phone lit up with notifications. Tinsley's engagement officially called off. Mother spotted apartment hunting in the budget side of town. Uncle Bobby's law firm dropping him as a client. Development project groundbreaking scheduled for next week. Your grandfather knew, Quinn said softly. He knew they'd self-destruct if given enough rope. I placed my hand on his headstone, feeling the cool granite under my palm. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cemetery, reminding me of the old oak tree shade. He knew something else, too, I said, opening the journal again. He knew revenge doesn't rebuild you, it just clears the ground. Quinn pointed to the final page, where my grandfather had drawn a small bird taking flight. So what now? She asked. I closed the journal, tucking it safely away. The groundbreaking ceremony would mark the end of one legacy and the beginning of another. Now, I said, we build something new. Behind us, the sun climbed higher, warming the wildflowers that refused to be contained in perfect rows, just like me. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew quite a crowd. I stood at the podium, scissors in hand, looking out over what used to be our backyard. The mixed-use development gleamed in the morning sun, modern architecture blending seamlessly with carefully preserved green spaces. And so, I concluded my speech, I'm proud to announce that the Elias Community Center will be free for all local residents. The crowd applauded. In the front row, Mrs. Peterson dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Quinn stood beside her, grinning. The scholarship program will cover full tuition for 5 students annually, I continued, because everyone deserves a chance to build their own legacy. More applause. Through the crowd, I spotted a familiar figure trying to blend into the background. My mother, wearing last season's clothes, watching with red-rimmed eyes. I cut the ribbon. Cameras flashed. The doors opened, revealing the community center's centerpiece, a magnificent stained glass window salvaged from my grandfather's study, now casting rainbow light across the entrance hall. Your grandfather would be proud, Savannah said, joining me as people filed inside. Using the development profits for this? It's what he would have wanted, I replied, building something that lasts. Quinn appeared with a tablet. You should see this. Tinsley's posting about moving to another state. Apparently her social circle doesn't understand her journey. I handed the scissors to an event coordinator. How's her job search going? Not great. Turns out social media influencer doesn't pay like family money did. A hesitant voice behind me. Zara? I turned. My mother stood there, clutching her purse like a shield. The center, she said softly. It's beautiful. It's useful, I corrected her. That's what matters. She glanced at the scholarship announcements posted in the lobby. Your grandfather taught you well. He taught all of us, I said. You just weren't listening. A group of students walked past, touring what would be their new study space. Their excitement was palpable. I was wrong, my mother whispered, about everything. Yes, I agreed. You were. She reached for her purse, hands trembling. I found this in one of the boxes we salvaged. She pulled out a small, worn book. Your grandfather's original property ledger. I thought, maybe it belongs in the center's library. I took the book, feeling its familiar leather cover. There's something else, she said. The extended stay. It's not... I know. I met her eyes. Quinn told me you've been looking for apartments. She nodded, tears threatening. There's a unit, I said carefully, in the residential section upstairs. Affordable housing was part of the development plan, if you're interested. Hope flickered across her face. It's not charity, I added quickly. You'd pay rent like anyone else, but you'd be close to your job at the mall. A tear escaped, tracking down her cheek. Why would you? Because he taught me something else too, I said, nodding toward my grandfather's stained glass window. Legacy isn't just what you build, it's how you build it. Quinn appeared with more news. Uncle Bobby's wife left him. Something about financial misrepresentation. My mother flinched. The application office is down that hall, I told her, pointing. They open at 9 tomorrow. She nodded, clutching her purse tighter. Thank you, she whispered, then hurried away. Quinn raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? No, I admitted, but he would have wanted me to try. We walked through the center, past the library with my grandfather's name on the door, past the study rooms filled with eager students, past the community garden where Mrs. Peterson was already organizing volunteers. My phone buzzed, a message from Cody. Phase 2 planning meeting tomorrow? The development's second phase would transform another neglected property into something useful, something lasting. Outside, I stood where the old oak tree once grew. Its wood had been repurposed into benches throughout the center, still watching over everything that mattered. Ready to go? Quinn asked. Almost. I pulled out my grandfather's journal, opening to the last page where the little bird took flight. Below his final message, I added my own. Legacy isn't what you take, it's what you build, what you give, what you leave behind. The morning sun warmed my face as I closed the journal. Through the center's windows, I could see people exploring, connecting, building something new from the ashes of something old. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called out, free, unfettered, finding its way, just like he always knew I would. Okay, I said to Quinn, now I'm ready. We walked toward the car, leaving behind the ruins of what was, and stepping into what could be. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction at all, it's creation.
The air in Aunt Carol's living room was thick with tension, not just from the usual family drama, but from something colder, sharper. It was a Sunday, supposed to be a casual brunch, but everyone knew why we were really there. My dad, Gordon, had called this impromptu family meeting. He sat at the head of the dining table looking distraught, but his eyes, when they flickered to my mom, Valerie, were hard. She stole it, he said, his voice cracking just enough to sound believable to anyone who didn't know him. $7,000 gone, right before the accounts were frozen. My money. 1 second, drop your location below. I'm always curious about my global audience. My name is Taya, and I was 23 then, fresh out of college, still trying to figure out where I fit in a family that valued appearances above all else. I'd seen my mom, Valerie, 48, shrink over the past few months of this divorce. She'd been the primary caregiver, always managing the household, but financially she'd relied entirely on Gordon, 52. Now he was using that dependence as a weapon. For weeks I'd been watching Valerie crumble under the weight of his accusations. Gordon had painted her as a thief, a liar, someone who'd betrayed him. The rest of the family, led by my Uncle Manuel, 54, Gordon's brother-in-law, had bought into it. Manuel was the patriarch, the one whose opinion everyone deferred to. He'd always preached about family unity, about sticking together no matter what. But unity apparently meant agreeing with Gordon. My older sister, Paige, 29, sat across from me, her face a mask of disapproval. She'd sided with Dad from day one, convinced Mom was in the wrong, despite knowing how manipulative Gordon could be. My cousin Reuben, 33, who was trying to get into law school, nodded along with everything Gordon said, probably thinking it was good practice for his future career. But I knew something they didn't. I'd spent late nights digging, not because I was trying to prove anything, but because I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Gordon's story about Mom stealing the money never sat right. He claimed she transferred it out of a joint account just before the freeze order came through. But I remembered an old email, a bank notification from years ago that had always seemed a bit odd. I'd finally found it buried deep in an old inbox, a bank statement dated 2 days before. The accounts were frozen. It clearly showed a transfer of exactly $7,000, not to Valerie's personal account, but to a holding account with a cryptic name. An account Gordon had set up years ago for business expenses. It wasn't stolen by Mom, it was moved by him. I waited for a lull in Gordon's performance, for the moment when everyone was looking at Valerie with pity and judgment. Then I pulled out the printout I'd folded neatly in my pocket. "Dad," I said, my voice steady, "this isn't what happened." Gordon stopped mid-sentence, his eyes narrowing. Manuel leaned forward, his expression darkening. "What are you talking about, Taya?" Manuel boomed, his voice filling the room. I laid the statement flat on the table, pushing it towards Gordon. "This is from the joint account. 2 days before the freeze, the $7,000 went here." I pointed to the line item, then to the destination account number. Not to Mom's personal account. It went to the Mason Holdings account, the one you set up. A stunned silence fell. Valerie looked at the document, then at me, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and dawning hope. Gordon's face went from feigned anguish to pure, unadulterated rage. "What is this, Taya?" he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "You're calling your father a liar?" "I'm just showing what the bank statement says," I replied, keeping my voice even. Manuel slammed his hand on the table. "This is family business, Taya. You don't interfere. You don't accuse your father based on some piece of paper you found." Paige glared at me. "You're just trying to cause trouble, Taya. You're always taking Mom's side." "You're splitting the family." "I'm taking the side of the truth," I said, looking directly at Gordon, then at Manuel. Manuel stood up, his face flushed. Get out of my house, Taya. You are no longer welcome here. You choose to betray your family, you face the consequences." No one said a word, not Reuben, who was supposed to be studying law, not even Aunt Carol, who just wrung her hands. My cousin Alyssa, 21, who was usually quiet, looked like she wanted to speak, but she just stared at her plate. I stood up, picked up the bank statement, folded it carefully, and put it back in my pocket. "Fine," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "If the truth is betrayal, then I guess I'm a traitor." I walked out of the house, the silence of the family meeting pressing on my back. My phone buzzed in my hand. A text from Paige. "Don't bother calling. We're done." Then, one by one, their numbers went from green to gray, blocked, every single one of them. I moved out of my apartment that week. It was technically mine, but Gordon had been paying the rent, a subtle leash he'd always held. Now that leash was severed. I packed what I could, leaving behind the ghost of a family I no longer recognized. The silence was deafening, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of clarity. 18 months. That's how long it had been since I walked out of Aunt Carol's house, the silence of my family a physical weight on my back. 18 months since my phone had gone dead with their blocked numbers, since I'd packed my meager belongings and found a tiny, affordable studio apartment on the other side of the city. I was 24 and a half now, and the world felt both smaller and infinitely larger without the constant, suffocating presence of the Mason family. The first few months were brutal. Loneliness was a cold, constant companion, but I learned to lean into it, to find strength in the quiet. I started documenting everything, not just for a potential legal battle, but for myself. A private Google Drive, meticulously organized, became my sanctuary. Court dates, emails, screenshots of my family's perfect smiling faces on social media, celebrating birthdays and holidays without me or Mom. It was a digital archive of their betrayal and my quiet, defiant survival. My mom, Valerie, now 49 and a half, was a shadow of her former self. The divorce, which Gordon had dragged out with every legal maneuver possible, was bleeding her dry, emotionally and financially. I'd watch her on our weekly video calls, her shoulders slumped, her eyes perpetually tired. She'd lost weight, and the confident spark she once had was gone, replaced by a constant low hum of anxiety. "Another extension, Taya," she'd say, her voice flat. "His lawyer filed for more discovery. Again. It's like he's trying to outlive me in court." I'd just listen, offering what comfort I could. I knew Gordon, 53 and a half, was playing a long game. He thrived on control, on wearing people down until they gave in. He was still living in the big house, still projecting the image of the wronged patriarch, while Mom fought for every penny she was owed. Meanwhile, Paige, now 30 and a half, posted pictures of family vacations, smiling with Gordon and Manuel, 55 and a half. Reuben, 34 and a half, would occasionally pop up in their photos looking smug in his new suit, probably thinking about the law school he was still aspiring to. It was a carefully curated narrative designed to show the world that the Mason family was strong, united, and completely unaffected by the rebellious daughter and the greedy ex-wife. They'd scrubbed us from their lives as if we'd never existed. I kept my head down, working my tech job, paying my own rent, rebuilding my life brick by brick. I didn't reach out. I didn't try to explain. What was there to explain? They had chosen their side, and I had chosen mine. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, a registered letter arrived at Mom's small rented apartment. She called me, her voice trembling. "It's a subpoena, Taya," she whispered, almost too afraid to say the words, "for a forensic audit. They want everything. All my accounts, all my records, going back years." My stomach dropped. A forensic audit. That meant they were digging deep. Gordon wasn't just trying to win the divorce. He was trying to bury her. He wanted to prove she had hidden assets, that she was the one with dirty hands. It was a desperate move, a last-ditch effort to discredit her completely. "It's fine, Mom," I said, trying to sound confident, though a cold dread was starting to coil in my gut. "We'll get everything together. We have nothing to hide." But as I hung up, a different thought surfaced. Gordon always had something to hide. He was the one who shuffled money around, who set up those obscure holding accounts. If they were digging this deep into Mom's finances, what if they accidentally stumbled onto something of his? Later that night, as I was scrolling through an old news feed, a notification popped up on my phone. It was a text message from an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat. "Your dad is playing with more than $7,000. Check 2019 filings." My blood ran cold. It had to be Alyssa, 22 and a half. She was the only one who had ever shown a flicker of empathy. The text was anonymous, but the warning was clear. Gordon wasn't just fighting over a paltry sum anymore. He was playing a much bigger, much dirtier game, and he might have left a trail. The anonymous text about the 2019 filings burned a hole in my thoughts. It had to be Alyssa, 22 and a half. She was the only one who might risk reaching out, the only one who had ever looked at me with something other than judgment during that family meeting. The warning was vague, but the implication was clear. Gordon, 53 and a half, had done something in 2019 that was more significant than just hiding $7,000. I spent the next few evenings hunched over my laptop in my small studio, digging. My Google Drive, which had become a digital fortress of my ostracized life, was now my command center. I started with 2019. I searched through old email accounts, cloud storage, even my old university drives, places where I might have inadvertently saved something related to my dad's finances. He was always sending us kids documents, asking us to print things or just forwarding information that seemed innocuous at the time. It was painstaking work. Most of the files were junk. Old school projects, vacation photos, spam. But then, late one night, fueled by lukewarm coffee and a stubborn refusal to give up, I found it. Buried in a folder labeled Old Tax Docs, which I created when I was 19 and helping my dad organize his digital files, was a PDF. The file name was something generic like Q-FAR Summary 2019 PDF. I remembered him asking me to save it for him, saying it was just a summary of some investments. I clicked it open, my heart thumping a little faster. It wasn't a tax document. It was an account summary, but not for any of the accounts I recognized. It listed a series of transfers, large sums, moving between entities with names I'd never heard of. Shell accounts, the kind of names that screamed money laundering red flags. My eyes scanned the document, my mind racing. Then I saw it. a transfer dated early December 2019 for exactly $7,000. The description was vague, consulting fee, but the destination account number, it was the same one I'd seen on the bank statement I presented at the family meeting, the one Gordon had used to funnel the money into Mason Holdings. The very account he claimed the Valerie 49.5 had stolen from. My hands trembled as I cross-referenced the details with the current audit data that Mom's lawyer had shared with me. The forensic audit was going to dig into everything. If this document, this simple PDF, was linked to the $7,000 he'd accused Mom of stealing, then it wasn't just about that one transaction. It was about a pattern. The account summary showed multiple transfers over the course of 2019, all leading to various shell accounts, some with names that sounded vaguely familiar, like names of companies my dad had mentioned in passing, but never in detail. It was a spider web, and the $7,000 was just one tiny thread in it. This wasn't just about a divorce anymore. This was about something far more serious: embezzlement, fraud, the kind of thing that could land someone in jail. Gordon, 53.5, wasn't just manipulating his family, he was manipulating the system, and he had used me years ago to inadvertently save the evidence. I spent another hour meticulously comparing the document to the limited information I had about Gordon's current financial dealings. The dates, the amounts, the cryptic account names, it all started to form a coherent, terrifying picture. He hadn't just moved $7,000, he had been systematically siphoning money, likely from his own business, through these shell accounts, and then trying to frame Mom for a small portion of it to cover his tracks. The $7,000 was a distraction, a smokescreen. The weight of what I held in my hands was immense. This wasn't just vindication for Mom. It was a potential bombshell that could shatter Gordon's carefully constructed life. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the screen illuminating my face. The silence of my apartment felt heavy, charged with the implications of what I'd found. I knew I had to be careful. This wasn't just about proving Mom's innocence anymore. This was about exposing a criminal. Just as I was about to shut down my laptop and try to process everything, my phone rang. The screen showed an unknown number. My heart leaped. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. "Hello?" I said, my voice tight. "Taya?" a voice said, hesitant, almost a whisper. It was Reuben, 34.5. My cousin, the aspiring lawyer who had so readily sided with Gordon. "Hey, I think I messed up. I need your help." Reuben's voice, hesitant and a little desperate, was a shock. It had been 18 months, almost to the day, since he'd blocked my number, since he'd sat silently while Manuel, 55.5, threw me out. Now he needed my help. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. "Help with what, Reuben?" I asked, my voice flat, devoid of any warmth. I was 24.5, and the emotional distance I'd built over the past year and a half was a solid wall. He stammered, It's about Dad, Gordon, and the audit. Can I come over? It's important." And sensitive. I hesitated. My gut screamed no. But the anonymous text from Melissa, 22.5, about the 2019 filings and the document I'd just unearthed told me this might be connected. This was my chance to see how deep Gordon's manipulation went and how far his loyalists would bend when their own skin was on the line. "Fine," I said, giving him my address, "but just you." An hour later, my doorbell rang, but it wasn't just Reuben, 34.5, standing there. Paige, 30.5, was beside him, looking impeccably dressed but with a strained smile, and behind them looming was Manuel, my uncle, the self-appointed family patriarch, who had personally banished me. My jaw tightened. I said, just you, Reuben. Reuben shifted uncomfortably. They insisted, Taya. It's a family matter. Funny, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Last time it was a family matter, I was told to leave. And then you all blocked me. Manuel stepped forward, his usual bluster muted by a forced calm. Taya, we're here because we need to talk. This situation with Gordon and Valerie, it's getting out of hand. It's affecting all of us. I crossed my arms, leaning against my door frame, making no move to invite them in. This was my space, my sanctuary, and they were not welcome to pollute it with their hypocrisy. Affecting you how exactly? Reuben finally spoke up, his face pale. The forensic audit. It's not just looking at Aunt Valerie's accounts, it's looking at Dad's business accounts too. And there's something about a family investment trust he set up a few years ago. Manuel and we were listed as beneficiaries, and now it looks fraudulent. My eyes flickered from Reuben to Manuel. Gordon, 53 and a half, had always been good at pulling people into his schemes, making them feel like part of something exclusive, something profitable. A family investment trust was classic Gordon. He'd probably use their names to legitimize something shady without them fully understanding the implications. Fraudulent how? I prompted, enjoying the discomfort radiating from them. Paige finally chimed in, her voice tight. The lawyers are saying it looks like a shell company, and that some of the money that went into it might have been diverted from Dad's business. If it's tied to us, we could be implicated. Manuel cleared his throat. Gordon assured us it was all legitimate, a way to protect family assets. But now, with this audit, they're asking questions. Questions we can't answer without looking guilty. His usual domineering tone was gone, replaced by a desperate plea. Taya, you know Gordon. You always understood his methods. We need your help. Valerie's case could hurt us all. The audacity. They had cut me off, humiliated me, and now, when Gordon's house of cards threatened to collapse on them, they came crawling back. They weren't concerned about justice for Valerie, 49 and a half. They were concerned about their own financial skins. So you're saying you believed him when he accused Mom of stealing $7,000, but now that it might affect your own wallets, you're suddenly open to the idea that he's a liar and a fraudster? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Reuben wrung his hands. It's not like that, Taya. We didn't know the extent. We trusted him. You chose to trust him, I corrected, my gaze unwavering. Over the truth, over me, over Mom. Manuel stepped forward, trying to regain some semblance of authority. We made a mistake. We admit that. But we're family. We need to stick together now. Family? I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping me. You disowned me. You ghosted my mom. You celebrated holidays without us. You posted your perfect little lives online while Mom fought for survival and I rebuilt mine from scratch. Don't talk to me about family now. I looked at each of them, letting the silence hang heavy. They looked uncomfortable, ashamed, but mostly they looked scared. And that fear, I realized, was my leverage. I went inside, leaving them on my doorstep for a moment. I walked to my desk, picked up a large manila envelope I prepared, and returned. I held it out to Reuben. Inside this envelope, I said, my voice clear and firm, is a document. It's the 2019 account summary. It shows where the $7,000 really went, and it points to multiple shell accounts, including the Mason Holdings one. It also has a lot of other transactions that might interest the forensic auditor and the IRS. Reuben took the envelope, his hands trembling slightly. Paige and Manuel stared at it, their eyes wide. Use this in court, I continued, my gaze sweeping over all three of them. It will clear Mom's name. It will expose Gordon for what he is. But understand this, I'm not protecting any of you. You made your choices. This document is for justice. And if it implicates you, that's on you, not on me. I stepped back, closing the door slowly, leaving them standing there, holding the key to Gordon's undoing and potentially their own. The day of the hearing arrived, a crisp Tuesday morning, almost exactly 18 months since I'd been cast out. I didn't go to the courthouse. My presence wasn't needed, and honestly, I had no desire to see my family's faces, not after the crocodile tears and desperate pleas on my doorstep. I was 24 and a half, and my peace was more valuable than front row seats to their reckoning. My mom, Valerie, 49 and a half, called me that morning, her voice a mix of nerves and a fragile hope. "Reuben's here," she said, referring to my cousin, 34 and a half. "He brought the envelope. My lawyer, Mr. Davies, is reviewing it now." I just told her to stay strong, to trust her lawyer, and to remember that the truth was on her side. I didn't mention the document's full implications. Not yet. She had enough to deal with. I spent the day at work trying to focus, but my mind kept drifting to the courtroom. I imagined the scene, Gordon, 53 and a half, in his expensive suit, probably still trying to project an air of injured innocence. Valerie, small and tired, but with a quiet dignity. And then Reuben Page, 30 and a half, and Manuel, 55 and a half, sitting there waiting for the shoe to drop. Around midday, my phone buzzed. It was Alyssa, 22 and a half, the anonymous text sender. "OMG, Taya," her message read. "It's happening. Reuben just presented the document. Dad is losing it." A few minutes later, another text from Alyssa. "They're talking about offshore accounts, shell companies. The judge looks furious." Then a flurry of activity on social media. My phone started blowing up with notifications. Someone had apparently started live streaming snippets from the courtroom, or at least recording and uploading them almost immediately. The first clip I saw was grainy, shaky, but unmistakable. It was Gordon on the stand being cross-examined. His face, usually so composed, was contorted in a mask of disbelief and anger. The lawyer, Mr. Davies, was holding up a document. It was clearly the 2019 account summary I'd given Reuben. Mr. Davies's voice was calm, methodical, cutting through the courtroom's tension. "Mr. Mason, can you explain this transfer of $7,000 on December 3rd, 2019 to the Mason Holdings account, just 2 days before the joint accounts were frozen?" Gordon stammered. That was a legitimate business transfer. Nothing to do with the divorce. "And yet, Mr. Davies continued, his voice rising slightly, "you simultaneously accused your wife, Valerie Mason, of stealing that exact sum from the joint account, a sum which, according to this document, was never transferred to her, but rather to an account under your sole control, an account, I might add, that appears to be one of several shell entities used for a series of substantial offshore transfers throughout 2019. Gordon's face went white. He started to protest, to shout, but the judge quickly intervened, gaveling for order. The next clip showed the judge, his face grim, instructing the court reporter to mark several documents as evidence and to note the testimony. He also mentioned something about referring the matter to the proper authorities for further investigation. My phone continued to buzz. More clips appeared. Gordon, red-faced, pointing at Reuben, shouting, "You betrayed me!" "You gave them that?" Reuben looked terrified, shrinking in his seat. Paige had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Manuel just sat there, rigid, his face a mask of disbelief. The narrative was collapsing. The $7,000, once the centerpiece of Gordon's accusations, was now a tiny incriminating thread in a much larger, darker tapestry of financial malfeasance. The offshore transfers, the fraudulent trusts, the embezzlement. It was all coming out, live and unfiltered, for anyone with an internet connection to see. I watched, detached, as Gordon's carefully constructed image shattered. He was no longer the wronged patriarch. He was a cornered rat, exposed by his own greed and the very family members he tried to implicate. Later that afternoon, a new hashtag started trending on social media. Suddenly, Taya was right. It was slow at first, then picked up speed. People were sharing the clips, commenting on the hypocrisy, the injustice, and the sudden dramatic turn of events. Strangers, thousands of them, were validating what I'd known all along. That night, Valerie called me, her voice thick with tears, but this time they were tears of relief. "Taya," she sobbed, "it's over. He was exposed. The judge, he's furious. Thank you. Thank you." I heard the quiet strength returning to her voice, the first glimmer of her old self I'd heard in years. It was a beautiful sound. Just as I hung up, my phone vibrated again, a text from Reuben. "We think he might be arrested." Reuben's text, "We think he might be arrested," proved to be an understatement. The seismic shift in the courtroom had immediate repercussions. Within days, investigators were digging deeper. The forensic auditor, Angel Nichols, 24, who had been assigned to Valerie's case, was particularly interested in the 2019 account summary. I got a call from her not directly but through Valerie's lawyer, Mr. Davies. She wanted to know how I came across the document. I explained carefully how I'd found it, buried in old files, a relic from a time when I was just a naive 19-year-old helping my dad. I didn't embellish, just stuck to the facts. She seemed to understand. The IRS came knocking on Gordon's door shortly after. The offshore transfers and the shell accounts were red flags they couldn't ignore. The media, fueled by the viral courtroom clips and the Taya was right hashtag, picked up the story with a vengeance. Suddenly, my quiet rebellion was front-page news. A journalist from a major financial publication reached out to me, wanting an exclusive interview. They wanted to know about my side of the story, about being cut off by my family, about unearthing the truth. I politely declined. I wasn't interested in fame or public platform. My goal had been justice for my mom, Valerie, 49 and a half, and to expose Gordon, 53 and a half, for what he was. The public validation was a side effect, not the main objective. But I knew the story needed to be told fully, accurately, and without my personal bias coloring it. So, anonymously, I leaked the entire Dropbox folder, the one I'd been meticulously curating for the past 18 months, to a few trusted, reputable investigative journalists I'd researched online. It contained every email, every screenshot, every court document, every piece of evidence I had gathered. Let them piece together the full narrative. Let the facts speak for themselves. A few weeks later, a formal apology letter arrived at Valerie's apartment. It was from Gordon's attorney, a dry, legalistic acknowledgement of misunderstandings, and an offer to settle the divorce with full spousal support and a generous share of filtered assets. It wasn't an apology from Gordon himself, but it was a concession, a surrender. No one else apologized. Not Paige, 30 and a half, not Reuben, 34 and a half, not Manuel, 55 and a half. They had gotten what they wanted. Their names cleared, their potential legal troubles averted. But the humiliation of being exposed by me, the one they had cast out, was too much for their pride. They closed ranks again, even tighter than before, embarrassed that I had flipped the narrative so completely. I saw their social media posts. They were back to their curated perfection, but now with a subtle defensiveness. No mention of me, of course. No mention of the truth. Just veiled references to difficult times and moving forward. One afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a call from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Taya? It was Alyssa, 22 and a half. Her voice was choked with emotion. It's Alyssa. Hey, I said, surprised she was calling. She'd only ever texted anonymously before. I had to call, she whispered, her voice cracking. I saw what you did, what you found, and thank you for not wrecking everyone's lives when you had the chance. I knew what she meant. I could have used the information to publicly implicate Reuben and Manuel, to expose their complicity in Gordon's schemes, but I hadn't. I had given them the document to use, knowing it would protect them from Gordon's fallout, but also knowing it would expose him. I hadn't gone for scorched earth. I had gone for justice. I just wanted the truth out there. Alyssa, I said, my voice soft. That's all. I know, she said, and I could hear her crying quietly. I'm sorry, Taya, for everything, for how they treated you. It wasn't an apology from the family, but it was an apology from someone who mattered. It was a small crack in the wall of silence, a quiet acknowledgement that meant more than any public declaration. A few weeks later, the news broke. Gordon Mason was officially indicted on multiple charges of fraud and embezzlement. Valerie received full spousal support and a significant share of the filtered assets. It was a victory, a hard-won peace, but the family remained silent. The phone lines stayed dead. The social media accounts remained scrubbed of any mention of me. The silence was back, but this time it felt different. It wasn't a punishment. It was their choice, and I was finally free of it. Months passed. Gordon, 53 and a half, was awaiting trial, his legal battles now far more serious than a divorce settlement. Valerie, 49 and a half, was slowly, tentatively rebuilding her life. She'd found a smaller, more manageable apartment, and the constant stress was finally lifting from her shoulders. We talked every day, and I could hear the old spark returning to her voice. My own life had settled into a new rhythm. The initial media frenzy had died down, but the story of the Mason case had resonated. The anonymous Dropbox folder I'd leaked had provided enough material for several in-depth articles and eventually a true crime documentary series. One evening, I was curled up on my couch in my tiny studio, scrolling through TikTok, when a notification popped up. New episode, Family Fraud, the Mason Case. It was the documentary. I clicked on it, a strange mix of dread and morbid curiosity churning in my stomach. The episode started with a dramatic voiceover, detailing Gordon's rise, his carefully constructed image, and then the sudden public collapse of his empire. They showed clips from the courtroom, the viral moments of Gordon's unraveling. They interviewed Angel Nichols, 24, the forensic auditor, who spoke calmly about the complexities of financial fraud and the unusual nature of how the initial evidence came to light. They even showed snippets of the social media frenzy, the Sari Taya was right hashtag flashing across the screen. My name wasn't mentioned directly, but the narrative was clear. The daughter who stood by her mother was the quiet hero. Strangers on TikTok in the comment section were cheering me on, praising my courage, celebrating the karmic justice. It was a strange, surreal experience, watching my family's dirty laundry aired for the world and being hailed as a silent champion. But as I watched, a hollow feeling settled in my chest. My phone sat beside me, silent. No call from Paige, 30 and a half. No text from Reuben, 34 and a half. No word from Manuel, 55 and a half. My name was cleared publicly, my actions vindicated by thousands of strangers, but privately the silence from my family remained absolute. It was a strange kind of victory. I had achieved justice. Gordon was facing the consequences of his actions. Valerie was free. But the family that had cast me out remained a closed unit, their pride too great to admit their error, their loyalty to Gordon, even in his disgrace, still stronger than their willingness to acknowledge the truth I had brought to light. I realized then that revenge wasn't validation, it was liberation. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need their acceptance. Their silence was no longer a punishment. It was simply a reflection of who they were and who I was not. I was free of their manipulation, their gaslighting, their toxic loyalty. Later that night, unable to sleep, I opened TikTok. I recorded a short video, just my face, looking directly into the camera. My voice was calm, almost detached. Sometimes, I said, a slight knowing smile playing on my lips. The wolves wear wedding rings and matching Christmas sweaters. I didn't explain it. I didn't need to. The people who knew, knew. The people who understood, understood. It was a cryptic message, a final, quiet mic drop. I posted it and immediately felt a lightness, a sense of finality. The next morning, Valerie called me, her voice trembling. "Taya," she said, "I got a letter in the mail." "What kind of letter?" I asked, my heart suddenly pounding. "From Gordon," she whispered. "He wrote it before the indictment, a confession." My breath hitched. A confession, after all this time. "What does it say?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "He admits to everything," Valerie said, her voice a mix of shock and a strange, quiet triumph. "The offshore accounts, the trusts, the money. He says he thought he was untouchable. He says he ends it with, 'I thought you'd never fight back.'" I closed my eyes. "I thought you'd never fight back." That was it. That was the core of it all. He had underestimated us. He had underestimated me, and that underestimation had been his undoing. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon, nearly 6 months after Gordon's indictment and the airing of the documentary. The leaves on the trees outside my window were starting to turn, a vibrant, defiant splash of color against the encroaching gray of autumn. I was 25 now, and the world felt infinitely lighter. I was on my way to visit Mom Valerie, who was 50. She'd settled into her new, modest apartment across town. It wasn't the sprawling house she'd shared with Gordon, but it was hers, truly hers, filled with her own choices and a palpable sense of peace. I stopped at a small florist and picked out a bouquet of bright yellow sunflowers, her favorite. When I arrived, she greeted me with a genuine smile, a warmth that had been missing for years. The lines of stress around her eyes had softened and she looked healthier, more vibrant. We sat on her small balcony sipping tea, talking about her new part-time job at a local library and the community garden she'd joined. It was a simple life, but it was real. "You know," she said, looking out at the city skyline, "sometimes I still can't believe it. After all those years, all the fighting, it's just quiet." "Quiet is good, Mom," I replied, squeezing her hand. "Quiet means peace." We didn't talk about Gordon much anymore. His trial was ongoing, a slow bureaucratic process, but the outcome felt inevitable. The confession letter he'd sent Mom, the one ending with, "I thought you'd never fight back," was a constant reminder of his hubris and his ultimate downfall. When I got back to my own apartment, there was a package waiting at my door. It was a flat, heavy envelope, officially sealed from the state attorney's office. My heart gave a little thump. I knew what it was. I opened it carefully. Inside was a hard copy of the final court documents related to Valerie's divorce settlement, officially recorded. It detailed the full spousal support, the division of assets, the clear exoneration of Valerie from any accusations of theft. It was the official legal confirmation of everything we had fought for, and nestled within it a separate document detailing the preliminary findings of the financial investigation into Gordon's activities, referencing the 2019 account summary I'd provided. I laid the documents out on my small kitchen table. The paper felt solid, real. This wasn't just a digital file anymore. This was tangible proof. I picked up a permanent marker. On the top page of the divorce settlement in bold, decisive letters, I wrote one word, closed. I then took a deep breath, gathered all the documents, and walked over to a small, fireproof safe I kept hidden in my closet. I placed the stack inside, locking it with a quiet click. It wasn't about holding on to it for future battles. It was about filing it away permanently. It was done. The silence from my family remained. No calls, no texts, no unexpected visits from Paige, Reuben, or Manuel. They had chosen their path, and I had chosen mine. The public validation, the documentary, the trending hashtags, it had all been a powerful, cathartic echo of vindication. But the true liberation had come from realizing I didn't need their acknowledgement to be whole. I thought about the family gatherings, the forced smiles, the unspoken rules. They had preached about blood being thicker than water, about loyalty above all else. But when the truth had spilled, when it threatened their carefully constructed world, they had bled the fastest. They weren't there when the bleeding stopped because they were too busy trying to staunch their own wounds, self-inflicted by their complicity and their pride. I didn't cut them out. They just weren't there when the bleeding stopped.